Shop for the Planning Commission, and I'm Larry Iwan. I'm the co-chair of the, or assistant chair, whatever we call it, vice chair. The vice chair of the Planning Commission. Bill's not here today, so I'll be leading the meeting today. Before we get started, I just want to recognize the fact that today is John Taylor's birthday, and if you have something, you can provide him a gift. Okay.
Greatest gift ever.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I said before somebody came in the room, I said it was like an omen for me today. As I pulled onto the parkway, there was a 5-ton truck in front of me from one of the landscape guys, and there was a big 24-inch stump in the back of the trunk. And I said, no, this is why we're doing this. This is why this is important. So. I wanted to set the ground, or not the ground rules, but set the expectations for today. What we're doing here this morning, it's what we were tasked to do. What was the timing that we were asked to do it in, and where are we today? Those are the three major things that we're going to try to do this morning. First, what we were asked to do was, as a subcommittee, was to develop a town ordinance to govern the protection and maintenance of trees here on the island, and to develop a landscape ordinance to go with it. We started in March, and we did not start with a blank sheet of paper. We started from this, this has been guiding the development of Kiowa for since, I don't know, 30 years or something, 30 years. And so we started with this. So it was not a blank sheet of paper. But in addition to this, we were also, John went out and did a lot of research for us, and we must have had 5 or 6 other ordinances from other municipalities that were relevant to us. So we added to that the other ordinances from other municipalities. And we've been, over the course of since March when we started, we've been contacting and inviting in people who have an interest in this, who have a stake in this, to come in and provide input, give us their inputs into how we can develop an effective code. Now, relative to our objective, we had an aspirational deadline of December to make a recommendation to town council, and we still may be able to do that, but it all depends on how, where we are now, what we feel today, and how it goes. The longer-term objective was to have an ordinance that maintained the quality of development that Kiowa has been providing for 30 years. And to make that ordinance something that is that the town can enforce, but in addition to that, we want to avoid unintended consequences of unnecessary delays and unnecessary expenses. So we want the ordinance, but we want to make sure that we have the ordinance written in a way that doesn't create those unintended consequences. What is our objective today? Today, this is a planning workshop, and it is to involve the other stakeholders in the process, including, I'm glad to see we have a lot of our landscape experts here, because that's very important. We've got the ARB represented here. We've got the rest of the Planning Commission. The subcommittee was 3 people of the 7 people Planning Commission, and so we want to get our fellow members involved in the process. And providing their guidance in developing this ordinance. Then, as we listen, we want to consider, we have a rough draft that John's put out, and I think there are copies outdoors if you hadn't, or outside if you haven't picked it up. But we want to take a look at that and consider and update any recommendations that may come as we do this workshop. And then, if at the end of the planning session, the planning commission can determine, are we ready to go forward with a recommendation to the town for an ordinance? So the objective, the ultimate objective of this workshop is to determine, is to take the input, identify where we can enhance, improve, eliminate the unintended consequences and what we've got published so far, and determine whether we have more work to do or whether we can take it to the town council prior to their meeting. So what will happen then is that at the end of this workshop, we're going to go into a special session, specially called meeting of the Town Planning Commission. And we'll have one or two decisions to make. We'll have a decision either to vote with the edited, whatever we edit coming out of this session, to go forward to the town, or that we're not quite ready to do that yet, and that we need more time, and the process needs more time to go forward. And at that time, either we'll table it, or we'll vote to pass it on to town council. So with that, I will, and obviously, any questions on that before we start the, okay.
That last part we're going to do at the formal meeting.
We have a formal meeting where we have to
Here,
determine
okay.
whether we're going to send it to town council or we're going to table it. Okay, so it could be a very short meeting or it could be a long meeting, I don't know. Yes? Luke? We're going to start with public comments, that's exactly right. And based on that, I'm really, really glad to see, the people who are probably going to be the most impacted on this here this morning, because we really want to have your input, and so we can make a better product. So with that, I will open up the meeting to public comments, and if you don't, what do we just need?
Name and address, and you can give your company if you like. And
Okay, just kind of stand.
Well, for residents, we need name and address, but for contractors or people working on the island, we just need our company they're representing.
yeah, I think name. You can just provide your name and address for your company.
Okay, perfect. Okay, with that, anybody want to step forward and make comments prior to?
My name's Chad
Oh,
Dunn.
just 1 second. You just need to speak in the mic because it's being live streamed. You got it there?
Good morning. My name's Chad Dunn. I'm an architect.
Started practicing and working with a firm starting in 92. Oh, after finishing graduate school.
Thank you.
Seen a lot of change. So thank you for the changes y'all reading through the draft last night. There seems to have been significant movement. In the big picture, I think in it's just I've been communicating with and
Don't blame this on me.
I'm not.
but he asked some questions about what the actual goals were
Behind the tree ordinance.
in the picture. And it kind of dawned on me the last couple of days that I think there's a difference between saving trees and saving habitat. And the way you go about it is similar, but at the same time, I think it's different. And I think that in terms of what y'all really want, it may actually be better habitat versus saving the trees in particular. Saving trees is a great thing, but habitat's actually probably more beneficial in a broader sense. To that, you can look at it a couple of ways.
Density.
Interestingly enough, if it's done right, higher density can actually save more habitat and more trees than lower density. It mainly just depends on how it's done. Where you can actually isolate certain parts of the development from each other using natural buffers, that would actually save more habitat, more contiguous habitat, and be better for the environment. So there's actually an opportunity there. One other thing that I think that in looking at the trees, there's not much distinction between the different species of trees. Like a live oak can take a lot of changes
To its environment, whereas magnolia, it doesn't even like you bother its root structure at all. So you really can't treat the trees the same way, only because they react differently.
working in and among them, as we've been doing for a long time, working houses in, and I realize that's a little bit different, but I think that
There probably needs to be more flexibility.
on how it's done and for how the ordinance is applied. It just seems a little too uniform to cut, and it may actually create more problems than it really solves. That's-
Also, when, and we have some arborists and landscape architects that probably speak this a lot better than I can.
But in terms of the mitigation of the trees, trees kind of need space to grow and mature, and then you've got the understory trees and how they all work together. And you may be asking for too much mitigation. And also, in terms of the size of trees, like, I actually have worked as a rodman. So at Clemson University, transferred to UT Knoxville from engineering into Clemson doing architecture. Took a surveying course, so I've actually taken a course in surveying. And a couple of summers I worked as a rodman. Trying to get locate the 3 and 5 oaks is going to be onerous. You're probably going to double or triple the cost of a survey. It's all man hours. And that's kind of getting back to the habitat and how the tree protection would work in terms of preserving the habitat. So I think that may be a better way to look at it, the emphasis on preservation of habitat versus just the trees. Trees included, but, and let's see. Also, I think that we're, that balance between habitat, like have some clients who actually have been there a while, getting ready to do a major renovation. And in the front yard, there's an area where deer actually bed down because it's actually kind of like, there's a little bit of like microhabitat, I guess you call it. So I think that there's a way to kind of work that into the process to encourage that type of habitat in the landscape, both in maybe in single family and also in multifamily or like larger scale projects. Let's see, last thing. And I think there's also in doing that, I think you can also strike a great balance between view corridors for like whether it's single family or how like, since I don't really know what the larger scale projects are and how they're being worked into the landscape, I think there's a balance you can strike between how they're implemented so that you get the best balance of habitat, tree preservation, and livability, and also opportunity, like the connectivity between, say, if you took, if you took little versions of Atlantic Beach, that's what it's called, Ocean Oaks, and the club cottages, where the density is kind of tight, you create a connectivity between different developments using like our bike paths like you do in Oak Park and stuff like that. There's an opportunity to create that balance and actually like more, in a more integrated manner, live with nature, which I think is the overall goal. Sure.
It would be helpful for me if you could put something more concrete around the difference between the habitat. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, John. Between saving trees versus saving habitat. I'm not, I could use an example to help me understand that.
Imagine like you've got and since I know single family better than I know anything else, you're on a cul-de-sac, and even in front of the house where the two properties come together, if that's allowed to kind of grow up a bit more naturally, and it's large enough, that can actually become habitat. If you're on a golf course and so your streets are probably busier out front, where the properties come together, you can allow that the common corner on each corner to develop. And a bit more naturally, but still maintain the view corridors that the property owners are actually kind of purchasing the properties to for those views and that visual access. So there's always a balance that you have to kind of maintain.
Yeah, but I was trying to listen to that too, is that, are you suggesting that if they're, instead of keeping a tree there, it would be better to?
Well, in the planning stage, you can work around the major trees. So it's like when, So based on what I've seen, when they're planning neighborhoods on Kiowa, and most developers do this, they'll do a high-level survey where they're trying to get the general topography, they're trying to get the major trees. And like, usually I think the standard was 24 inches, Jen? Okay. You might be, maybe you lower that to, say, 18, so you can get a little bit more of the diversity. Then using that, you can use that to kind of like, as skillfully as possible, lay out the lots to preserve the trees and then work in that habitat. And it's got to be a little bit different when you're doing multifamily because you've got like fire truck access, you've got the infrastructure is different. Like if you're doing a multi-story, you can park underneath where that way you're reducing the parking around, just like the pedestal podium kind of concept. But the basic idea is that you can create connectivity, you can create an enhanced living style, but you can also get a better balance between the habitat. And I'm sorry, I'm not better able to define what I'm talking about, only because I've only been thinking about 2 days. So it's not a fully developed notion. It's just, but I think there's a possibility there that is probably different. I mean, if I remember right, the planning for most of Kiowa came out of some Hilton Head, Sea Pines and Hilton Head. And it was much more of a 1970 suburban kind of development. Starting in the 80s and 90s, you had new urbanism, which is a movement to create more traditional kind of town centers, link them together. Freshfields, Atlantic Beach is right? Yeah, Atlantic Beach are kind of reminiscent of that. Better examples also could be seen in Hampton Park Terrace downtown, Wagner Terrace downtown, somewhat the old village of Mount Pleasant. You can go to the Park Circle. Now, you could take those and you could bring them down smaller, almost like hamlets, like smaller scale developments, and then have the natural areas kind of between them and link them using the bike paths, or even like a blending at, say, Ocean Park, where you have the open areas plus more natural habitat. So I think there's definitely a way to kind of create that balance in the landscape in terms of the development of the land.
So, where I thought you were going to go, and this is a question for you, is it sometimes better to have a few less trees so the understory is more robust, or how do you think about that?
I think it can be. Now, Jen's nodding. Trees, like, okay, one example, I've been trying to think about how to describe this, like, we've all probably driven through the South Carolina Low Country, or maybe in the upstate, and you've seen the pine farms, where they're growing pine trees for either pulp or lumber. And you can see that they're on a grid. Well, that grid, I'm sure, is idealized for how long they're going to grow. You know, like a pulp tree, that won't be growing as long as a lumber tree. So the lumber trees, I'm sure, are a wider grid. The house I grew up in, West Ashley, was a POW camp during World War II, and when we built our house, we cut down like 40 pine trees on about an acre lot because it was gridded in pines. Things need room to grow, and so it's like you need to, again, that's part of the balance of how things evolve over time, like the difference between a young forest and an old forest, where and again, there are people who speak this much better than I can to it I can't, but I think there's got to be a way to think about how that evolves over time, how the trees are treated over time, because the ordinance just seems as and I really do appreciate the way it's evolved, so not appreciate the work that's gone into it. But I think over time, there's probably some more thought needs to be put into how it evolves over time, how you see the landscape evolving over time. I think is actually a much bigger issue that y'all have kind of opened the door on.
Let me ask you a question as to all your comments, and I do appreciate the segregation, if you will, between the habitat and the trees.
I don't think there's segregation.
Well, not segregation, but
It's just
joining the purpose or the objective. Let's not mince words. The question here is, all of your comments suggest new areas of development. How would you apply, or better yet, do any of your comments apply to existing developed areas?
Yeah, actually she did, and I kind of alluded to it, but I didn't go deeply into it.
Good, now that's where I'd like an example. Which ones?
Well, so the best example I can think of is like, since it's what I know, single-family residence. Again, getting back to not just developing a property, but let's say when you're doing a renovation or.
That's different, but that's covered, but I'm talking about a new, if you want to call it a rip down, that's fine, that's a new development. What about existing properties that aren't going to change?
It's going to be really hard in the sense that I think I'll bet all you can do is encourage it. Like taking down a tree, individual tree, I think the ordinance probably will help with that. But I think that typically, like, that will probably, I would assume, would happen with, people don't do something for no reason at all. Like, let's say a tree's grown and is endangering a house. Well, the ordinance kind of addresses
But
that.
that's the tree removal issue.
Yes, sir.
Right.
I think you're asking me about how something like that might be implemented over time relative to the existing houses that aren't.
No,
being changed.
I'm really asking how you think that whole concept affects the island as it is now, as opposed to areas of the island that aren't yet developed.
I think you could apply it universally, is a short answer. I think you could apply it over time to the existing development and the new development.
And only existing development when?
It's probably when the homeowners want to make changes. I'm not sure you can mandate it. I don't think you can tell
Rip downs or new,
when something changes. So when something comes before the ARB and for a single-family residence, that would probably be the primary vehicle. In terms of the landscape design, it can be encouraged to identify how increased habitat could be balanced with maintaining view corridors, and that also, that one, it kind of becomes a selling point, which is always great, in terms of like you're doing something better for nature. At the same time, you're maintaining the balance and the property values for why people typically buy property on Kiowa, where it's either the view of the golf course, the marsh, or the ocean. So I think that balance can be achieved.
I appreciate your comments about the cost of developing these natural habitat areas, but where on the island now, in the developed areas, do you feel that there aren't, my term is buffer, there aren't buffer areas between developed areas and the other developments, if you will, around it, that do have buffers that don't provide for habitat?
That's hard. I think that's something that would just take time you'd have to look at. I don't think I'm the right person to answer that question. I mean, I deal with individual properties. I really,
Andy, let me, Jen, are you intending to make some comments? Okay, because that may be something, because Jen deals with it all the time, and Jen was I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your last, Hayes, right? Yeah, Jen Hayes. Jen Hayes came to the subcommittee, and she's been the ARB, in charge of the ARB landscape approval process for 20 years, I think you told me, or something of that nature. Anyway, so I think if you have that question on a specific, she can probably answer it for you.
I had two questions of Chad, and I asked him.
I have a quick thing. One of their goals here, it's to protect trees.
yeah.
And we're focusing on the footprint of whatever house is designed on an area. And the goal is to protect everything outside that area, that if things need to be taken down for access for construction vehicles, and there's an understanding there. So I guess I'm confused because mitigation is currently required by the ARB. Any house you build, if you take down a 24-inch live oak in the middle of, and we're not, it has to be taken down because the lot has to be buildable. The people who own it are entitled to build their house. Mitigation is currently required. This just codifies what the ARB has been doing all along. If you take down a 24-inch oak, you got to put in 6 4-inch ones.
It's probably much more.
Oh, But I guess I'm concerned in reading this, what I'd like to know is specifically from the ordinance, what things do you not like that you think should, because I read through your comments.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, yeah, I appreciate that everybody in design wants to make it as easy as possible and as few regulations as possible. I get that. This ordinance, I don't think adds to, is particularly worse than what from your perspective, what the ARB currently requires. You still have to have the buffers, which will have the habitat. If you have a specific thing, you say, section this, I think, could be modified, tell us that.
Maybe to tag onto that, I know you, in your writing, mentioned semi-detached garage, so maybe that's an example you might want to talk about what the problems are with or without tree flexibility.
And I think this gets back to the flexibility that I think that the ARB currently has, and I think is beneficial, in the sense that if there are trees, whether specimen trees or grand trees, the ability to utilize a little bit of, like a percentage of the setback to create some flexibility with how a house fits into the lot. I enjoyed working the houses in the lots. It's not with the trees and trying to protect them. So what the mitigation numbers are what I'm more worried about if I understand the difference. And here's where, like, someone that's actually, again, will be better, much more qualified to answer this than me. There's a certain tree count that I believe they have. And I guess Matt Wilson also could help with this.
Have you seen the most recent draft? Because there was
I read it last night.
significant changes.
There were, but again, I'm not as involved as an architect in terms of the actual numbers of trees and the mitigation and that. I'm more mainly just trying to fit the house into the property as well as I can, as skillful as I can, to preserve as much of the trees as I can. And so, and work with them. So it's a little bit different because I don't actually get into the numbers of the mitigation. My only concern was that the way I was reading it, was it 8 inches or 12 inches or whatever?
8 inches diameter breast height.
But if you cut down those trees and you're mitigating them, you get into where you end up you're required to have so many trees, then they won't grow well.
Jen addressed that in our
Luke was trying to-
subcommittee, and she gave us that example, and we did make some
And I
changes.
think that by eliminating the palms and the pines.
Yeah.
That's significantly going to reduce the amount of mitigation.
Okay, I missed that,
Jen
sorry.
brought us yesterday.
Okay, yeah,
Gave us some specific examples, and by eliminating those, you could potentially reduce the mitigation by about 50%.
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
Ron-
we did
Ron,
away with
I missed
palms.
that.
We did away with palms and pines.
Okay, what I think at this point, I want to make sure that we take advantage of other people who are here. And
I agree.
I appreciate Chad stepping up and being the first victim. But
Give the opportunity.
what I would like to, if you can come back and if you want to come back and make another comment, that's great. And if we have other questions, you can ask. But I would like to make sure anybody else who's got a chance, because I got a feeling these guys want to get back to work. So, and Jen, are you here? Because you weren't going to be able to hear originally, were you?
I was not originally, but
So we got you for the entire 2 hours? Okay, good. So I'm gonna put you toward the back so we can hear some of the other people who are working in. Okay? Is anybody else? Please come up, tell me who you are and who you work for, or if you're a resident.
My name is Scott Anderson. I am an architect. I have Anderson Studio of Architecture and Design. I've been working on the island either for an architect since '98 and have my own practice since '04, and exclusively working on Kiowa. So, what I'd like to, I'm raising some questions about process of approvals for removals. So, first off, I think, my position is that Kiowa has gotten to where it is with people wanting to be here because of designing with nature It's been amazing, right? So we have a unique place, which, which I am in support of the town putting together an ordinance as the development agreement expires. And you'll need to have that in place. In my experience, we have avoided going to the BZA like at all costs. And you try and work, it's almost like the process of last resort, simply because the process is really cut and dry, takes at least 2 months, adds at least 2 months to our process. And when we've done it, and explored it, we've felt as though we had to have a complete design and almost nothing moving or changing once we apply and potentially receive the approval. And so we've avoided it. What has gone well in all of these years is working with the board and the process that they have. And I understand from the documents that I read that that's going to stay in place for the foreseeable future. What's really been fabulous about it is that we all know the protected trees, the grand trees, we know the mitigation, and what's really worked well is that we've got professionals on that review board that are taking a great interest in the island, of course, and in producing the best possible designs and developments for properties. So our firm really takes great pride in working with the trees, working with that habitat to create something really special and unique and preserve trees. So the way that we're successful in that is that it's kind of an iterative process of review of how we work with the trees. So that process before we even really start design, we meet Jen on the property. Danny Millman is here, an arborist. We call him for every one of our projects to come and assess those trees. And we're always trying to get something really special in there. And we listen to the position of the board on what they think is important about that site, what absolutely needs to stay, what might be open for removal. And then, so we take that first pass. Our process typically is somewhere 9 months to a year and a half, depending on the scale of the project. But we take our time to make sure that we're considering the best options and marrying building and development with trees. So that process is multi-stepped. And through that, the board comes along. We're able to bring our design professionals along, so our landscape architects are working with that. The arborist, we will get builders. We try and have a builder early on in every project because it's going to take all of us to make sure that we are keeping those trees and that we're building a house that our clients want and positioning them so that we have long-term health of trees. And so it's been really great, and I think it's been really successful. It's almost never easy, but I don't think anybody expects it to be easy. And we get really good things out of things that aren't easy and that you're committed to. So a couple of things about the proposed ordinance is really what the triggers are to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
That out.
You took it out.
There is no more, BZA does not, in our subcommittee on Monday, we took the BZA out of the process.
Thank you. I was
Got a new
reading,
commission, that's okay.
Yeah, it'll be yes.
apologies, I'm going from what I read last week or read
Yeah,
last
no,
night. based
no,
on
that
last week.
came up, and that was an improvement we made.
Well, I think
No
that's
more
going to help a
BZA.
lot.
You may not like the new one any better, but go ahead.
Fine.
No,
It's
but
great.
no, but we realize they don't have the expertise and the time it takes and their meeting schedule and.
Well, that was going to be
out.
my suggestion, which is at some point, if the board goes away and they don't have any say, that the town, I would highly recommend that the town form some sort of review that I would almost duplicate the process because it has been really successful. Okay.
May like it better.
I think I'll probably
Yeah,
like it.
no, that was something we took out, and there's going to be a tree, what was it called, Stephanie? A tree preservation board that would be a next step when needed, when the planning director or his designee is not enough of a review process. There will be a tree preservation board, but it will not go to the PCA.
Boy, that's great. I mean, I think that the process is a big deal to getting it right. Just a couple of other things that I read in there, and I apologize if they've already been changed and I'm not aware of them. I was looking at tree protection around all trees and how far one has to stay off of them completely.
We've changed that,
You've
too.
adjusted that? Well,
Jen
Oh.
brought a chart and showed us if we did 10 feet around every tree, and she brought, and we weren't aware that, we changed that, too.
perfect. Well, that's great.
You listen.
Okay, so what I'll do is listen some more and read the next round and provide some written comments. But thank you all. I mean, I'm very much in support of when the board goes away, that there's something in place that maintains and enhances it.
Thanks, Guy.
Thank you.
Next person.
If the board doesn't go away, or the board retains its jurisdiction under KICA and continues to have approval rights, does the town need an ordinance separately?
If it is here in perpetuity, if they continue in
Yeah,
perpetuity,
well, but for the near term, let's put it that way.
I don't know that it's required. Now, I focus on single-family detached residential, and it has worked really well. I can't speak for other firms, and I can't speak for Jen's experience with other studios, other firms. From my perspective, it works really well. I would keep it. I wouldn't add to it. I think, so, thanks.
Okay, next person, anybody who else would like to make some comments? Anybody? No? Then we're going to ask Jen to step up. If you want to make some comments? I think they're relying on you.
If none of the arborists or
Just tell your name and anything for the record so that.
Oh, sure. Jennifer Hayes, ARB, landscape coordinator. And thanks for having this today and for the changes that you've made and the, intelligence and time that you've brought to creating this. I just got the revised draft, 20 minutes ago. And so I guess I do have some specific questions still, just based on looking through it quickly. And, but my overall question or thought would be that to encourage more time and thought to be given to allow for the vetting of the proposed ordinance language by all of the players that are involved. So that's including architects and landscape architects and arborists, and all of us have received this update this morning, and understanding that we're all on the same page in creating a great product for our owners and for Kiowa. I think it needs a little bit more time. And I was at the meeting last week and heard the chair then say, perfect is the enemy of the good. And I fully understand that, but I do think that there may be some, by allowing another day or 2 or 3 for this new language to be more thoughtfully reviewed. And, and even if that's just me saying, let me do that analysis that I did previously and shared with you on the new homes that are in for review, so that you can see what, if any, and I don't know that there are any, implications or unintended consequences there might be from this ordinance. Because the ordinance, does not match ARB guidelines, right? It's a similar pairing. It's had some adjustments to get closer to, but anytime you take statements that say may and turn them into shall, there's some disconnect there.
Yeah, just for the other planning committee, planning members. Jen, when she brought, what she did is she took the agenda for the coming ARB meeting.
Today.
There was eight houses or 9 houses. There were 8 houses going to come out. And she then overlaid what would be the impact of, at that time, the draft before you received today, what would be the impact of the, if this was and she pointed out she had some graphic examples. For example, you were talking about tree protection, and she circled, okay, you're saying 50 feet, and that got into the footprint of the house. It was very obvious even to me, who didn't know what a DBH was before. That's probably not what we want to do. So if she's, I'm very, very, I'll let please, the other 2 members of our subcommittee. I was very, very, it was a great learning experience for me. And if she's volunteering to do that again, I'm, with this updated draft, I'm certainly supportive of that. But you guys make your comments.
I think what you did on Monday was excellent. It was very helpful to us. That's what did away with the BZA and the extra protection, and we talked about roots and stuff. Given that was a very thorough analysis. Given we made the changes that were asked for, I'm not sure that there's anything new in this that would impact your analysis that wasn't done on the previous analysis. I mean, the changes we made were to address the concerns that you gave us. And there's nothing new that I think would change your analysis to add to it.
That may well be, but the only way to know is to actually run through that process again.
Yeah, and we will look, and I don't disagree that timing is important, that people need to have time. One of the things we discussed, if we do in fact refer to the town council, they have to do 2 readings. So we really have a month or 2 more before this is ever enacted. And so we have that time from the time we refer it for the readings of the town council, which will allow for more public comment to make certain changes. So we really, even if we do refer it, we still have a couple months to get more input. And if we delay, then everything else gets delayed out. So I'm not sure yet which is the right way to go, but either way, I think we will have the time you're asking for.
What is it that gets delayed out further?
If we don't refer, then the ordinance, it delays when the ordinance can actually be effective, because
And the problem with that is what?
There's a feeling that we need a town ordinance. Back when, what John sent us in March was, we were then looking at a May timeline. The real pressure point is our timeline with the end of the development agreement, so the absolute would be no later than November for a second reading. We obviously missed that. We can always adjust the timeline for planning initiatives, which we can in turn communicate for the council. We were hoping to get this done in June, July. We got delayed because...
Why? If that's the case, you're assuming something that hasn't happened. And
I'm just telling you
if
what we
it
were
doesn't
trying to-
happen, well, I'm asking.
So,
You're
Okay,
saying
let me interrupt for a second. Is that we're going to have
do that at the meeting.
we have a planning commission meeting. You guys can discuss this ashes out there. I really want to make sure that we get the public input.
Again, I support your idea that we take one good look at this new draft and let everyone make comments. And I think there's, Mr. McDonald provided us with written comments, and I think there's some very big questions still from what Mr. McDonald pointed out in his comments. And I hope that we can discuss those today, like tree removal for sightlines, because I don't think there's, and whether our designation of live oaks at greater than 16 inches, maybe that needs to be adjusted. And, you know, Mr. McDonald said the process needs to be subjective, and I think we've tried to make it more subjective by taking the BZA out of it and sending it more to John and the Street Preservation Board. So I hope we take time today and discuss some of these bigger topics, but I support your, you know, your idea that we take a good look at this language and give everyone a chance to weigh in one more time. I do also support Joanne that, you know, we should still have a goal of trying to get this to town council by December 5th. That should be our goal.
It's always been our goal. Now, one point is that Ron made, I just want to bring it up because I think it's in Chad's comments, is that one of the things we were trying to find out is, Ron has been very, very strong on this, is that removal of a tree to improve somebody's view of the third green is probably not a good reason to remove that tree.
Well, I want to ask John. John, do you want to run through the document first and then have discussion on topics?
So I would want us to remain in having any more public comment, and then we go and have that sort of discussion back and forth of some of those topics. So
That's good.
I'm fine either way. We
Yeah,
can
no, that's good. I think that's,
discuss the topics.
yeah, we want to make sure all the public gets their input into it.
So I just had one more thing, major item that question that I wanted to ask. I have many smaller questions, but I can save those and maybe they'll be addressed in John's presentation.
we also have an opportunity after
Okay.
after have some debate. So if there's
Great.
additional.
The other question that I have on behalf of both our owners and the fabulous design teams that work on Kiowa is, how is the process going to work for them? You know, there is a difference between the town ordinance draft related to trees and the ARB guidelines related to trees. And how do they best negotiate that to not add double cost for design fees or double time frame, specifically related to new construction?
So just as the ordinance is written in, maybe there's additional language we put in to clarify it or behind the intent. We would treat this as we would any other of our permits, right? So a tree removal permit would come with the construction phase. So as the design team is submitting for a zoning permit, they would now submit all of those additional documents, tree preservation plan or landscape plans in accordance with their new house construction. The idea that the subcommittee intended for the town's ordinance to not be as restrictive as the ARB, meaning that if you begin that ARB process, by the time you go through those initial preliminary reviews as historically done, by the time you submit to the town, the bulk of those things should be caught at the ARB's level and presumably would be able to be approved by the time it makes it to that zoning permit stage. So we're hoping that that does not create an additional delay. There might be some things in there regarding tree size that if that scrutiny kicks to a tree preservation board, that maybe that timeline we look at a little bit more closely. But the intent is for this ordinance to not be exclusively more restrictive than the ARB so that it can be submitted during that initial zoning permit stage. And so you would go through that zoning review, which would include looking at now trees as part of that zoning process, in addition to setbacks, height, and the like standards. And that would go into that normal queue of once that's approved to a building.
Right, and I appreciate the intent of that process. What I would point out is that the ARB reviews and gives feedback on trees at the very beginning of the design, and often well before any pen has gone to paper in terms of laying out a house. So if there is a 16-inch live oak or a 24-inch anything, the design teams and the owners are getting early decision on whether or not that tree can be removed and what the conditions of that, then what the consequences of that are. And the process that you're describing would mean that they would find out, once they've created construction documents, whether or not a tree could be removed. And what if the answer is no? What if ARB and the town are not aligned? And I have a thought as to how to solve that, and that would be, to either change the process, change the caliper, put in language about the rating of the tree, getting an A through F kind of a score, so that designers have more information as to what the guardrails are that they're designing to, and they know it in advance instead of at the end. Because we have seen with the county's ordinance that applies to Cacique, right, that owners and design teams are going to the county for their permit, and the county is telling them, no, you can't put, it's as simple as, no, you can't put pervious paving within 10 feet of that tree. And the architect says, well, that's my driveway into my house. Well, just redesign your house. It's been a year and a half, it's been thousands and thousands of dollars. It's not that simple.
I mean, those are the types of questions I want the commission to consider. So, I mean, if we can have some discussion on those types of implications moving forward. Yeah.
Are we saying that, is our ordinance saying you can't take the tree down? I would think that if construction documents come and our caliper is different, I'm not sure exactly what the differences are between this and the ARB standards, but if there is a difference, I wouldn't think that we would say, no, you can't build that. If the tree is in the footprint, that we would say you'd have to mitigate. I don't see us saying you can't.
Well, it may not, you may not say the worst case scenario, but then if that is the standard that you have, that if it's a tree within the buildable area that cannot be worked around, then you would give permission to remove it with mitigation. If that's
the intent.
then that should be written in the ordinance.
But
It's
isn't
not
there
written there
intent?
now.
So based on what we have written today, in our most recent draft is that anything within that building footprint could be removed. Then that's would be approved based on what's submitted as part of their tree preservation plan with mitigation. So that's how it's written today. But I think what I'm hearing, and correct me, and well, I see a hand that is that the timing of when design decisions are made, it's a little bit earlier of understanding, okay, is this truly a workaround, or is this tree can be removed? And I think that's, and if I'm hearing you, Joanne, is that we're not so much worried about a workaround. It's more so if it's in that building, proposed building footprint, we can remove it, so it shouldn't be an issue. Is that?
Yeah, our intent is not to say you can't remove a tree in a building footprint. You have to be able to build your house. I think our intent is if this tree is a protected tree, then it has to be mitigated. But I don't think it's our intent to say you can't take that tree out.
So then my recommendation then, well, I do want to hear from, my recommendation would be then to ensure that the ordinance reflects that we are essentially saying that more clearly, and then have some understanding of the difference between timeline process. If our subcommittee remembers when we began this process, there was a third sort of tiered element to this, would be creating more of a landscape design document that kind of emulates what the expectations are of what properties can and should look like on Kiowa from a more illustrative purpose. And that would have included should have included how that timeline of interaction with ARB, it's more of a readable document for the homeowner. They can kind of understand, not as technical as the ordinance, but then still put in some expectations of process. So step one, you're still going to the ARB first. We still would expect that you to have that initial conversation with the ARB. What would be step two, step three, and then building permit? But I'll pause there, yeah.
In looking at the written public comments, I mean, it's, again, what's been said today, I think people like the process as it is. You know, they feel the process as it is works. So I think the onus is on us to make sure our ordinance melds with the process and not,
Right.
you know, that we have to make this document so that it follows the ARB.
So, and I'm not familiar with this, so bear with me. So as you receive design documents, or you said you do the site plan in advance of a lot of work being done by architects, is it done sufficient such that at that time, they could take the tree plan and the tree preservation plan for permitting, so that it's permitted at the beginning of the design process rather than waiting until the construction documents are done? So it seems construction and tree ordinance are two completely separate things that don't have to follow the same
So
time.
twofold, our construction documents aren't required as part of the zoning approval. Most times we see those because they're developing elevations to get building heights, but the formal construction documents would be submitted for the building permit.
For permitting. And so instead of permitting the tree ordinance at the same time, can the tree ordinance be permitted at the beginning of the design phase? So she does her work, and if we move the tree ordinance forward and said, if she approves it, let's look at it right then. And then the design.
So
is that-
maybe
am I
after.
crazy, or?
No, it's a good, so maybe after, it is adding to people's process, right? But if the ARB review process is 3 stages, and, well, really 4 if you include the initial site analysis. But if following conceptual approval with the ARB, which is basically approval of a site plan and massing for a house, following that, individuals could potentially submit for site plan review with the zoning department.
I mean,
Or
that's
something
similar
reviewed.
to what I initially laid out. Maybe
Okay.
the phases of the ARB's process of conceptual, preliminary conceptual,
Yeah.
final, I mean.
Right.
But at some stage, maybe that's where we lean on you, whatever you feel is most ready as a ready document for the zoning to be reviewed based on landscaping and trees, as part of your ARB process would be the trigger point of when we want now you to submit to the town because we feel that it's at an approvable state, would be my thought pattern right now.
John, are we saying then that we want to write that into the ordinance?
I'm hesitant to write it into the ordinance because the initial component of this was to make sure that we are independent of the ARB. So not necessarily including the ARBs, dependent on the ARB's timeline, but make sure that we're accommodating of that.
Jennifer, 2 questions. Anything you've heard with respect to this issue, eliminate the duplication requirement? So the fact that they got to apply to both?
Your question is, have I heard from others?
In the comments right now. No, you're suggesting we need language, but have you heard, based on the discussion of what the language means now, or what they could do or can't do, have you heard anything that suggests we've eliminated duplication?
No.
Second question is really with respect to tree removal. In existing situations for single-family homes already developed, the ARB requires a certificate, if you will, or a form to be filled out
Yes.
that indicates what it is, and it's signed by, or it's not even signed by, you have to indicate who's going to remove the tree,
It is signed by the owner as well as
The
the
owner,
tree
yeah.
removal company or arborist.
if they're determined at the time.
Yes.
What do you require from that tree removal firm to have in terms of licensing or town permits or whatever?
The ARB would only require an arborist to be used. And, you know, it's a license, and I don't know if it's a federal or a state license. We have some arborists here who could speak to that. But the only requirement that we have is the use of a licensed arborist as opposed to a tree company. Those are very different skill sets and education levels and backgrounds, okay? So we require a licensed arborist if there is pruning over a certain caliper to be done on a tree.
Of all trees,
Yes.
regardless of the type, okay?
Yeah.
Or size?
Yeah, I mean, it's most particularly about live oaks because they grow in such a way, you know, that their limbs get to be a 6-inch or greater.
So everybody we have running around the island pruning trees has got an arborist on their staff?
No, so maintenance pruning can be just a tree company.
Tree removal has to be an arborist.
Tree removal
Same person.
can be a tree removal company or an arborist. Dune pruning and pruning of trees with limbs that are over 6-inch caliper has to be done by a licensed arborist.
Not every tree.
Live oaks, or is it all trees with 6-inch diameters?
It's all trees, it's just the way that a live oak grows, it's most particularly applicable to them, yes. And that's to ensure the long-term health that, you know, that the pruning and work is being done with best practices in mind.
So this term certified arborist, is what you require now?
It is. Is that in your ordinance? That was a question I had.
Number of places.
Okay, great.
And
before you go,
And it was changed, again, as part of your recommendation,
Oh,
that
great.
we not require a permit, that instead
Notification.
notification.
Right, okay. For the
For
dead
dead.
or,
Dead or diseased
Removal.
tree.
Hazardous.
Hazardous or dead tree.
so one of the things
C1.
that I did not see in here, it might be in here, and I apologize if it's in here. I saw more language around the diameter of the tree rather than around canopy. There's a little bit about leaf surface area. Should we think about canopy and tree removal? I know there's some language that says removing some trees may enhance, and I interpret it to be the canopy of the tree. How should we think about overall canopy of the lot? Or should we? Is it just number of trees and because canopy, for me, goes to the habitat that Chad was talking about. Rather than having, 40 palm trees, 5 live oaks might be a better canopy and habitat. So how do you think about that I know it's a big question, so I apologize.
the ARB guidelines address that through the 70% of existing trees need to be on the site at the end of construction. That's how we address, that's how we put a number on what is a changeable situation based on the unique site and the existing canopy that's there. So we do use quantity of trees. Our quantity is 70%. The town ordinance, I believe, is 50%. So it's more restrictive.
But we have done canopy studies for houses for
Yes, yeah.
Or say again, I missed that. Say that again.
We've done canopy studies for proposed new residences for the area.
Make sure that they're doing the 70%.
Request, no, just to see what the overall canopy at the end of the day of that tree that we're trying to work around.
Exactly, okay. But that's so you can meet your 70%, right?
Yeah, it's so that you can meet, this is again a guideline issue. It's hard to replicate an ordinance. It's so that you can meet the intent. Right.
expectation.
Right, that's true, yeah.
But if, to the point that John was making, but if yours is 70% and ours is 50%, then certainly, we'll fit under your umbrella.
You will? Thank you.
So, any more comments? Please.
Morning, I'm Matt with Three Oaks Contractors, 25 years of service, I think. Again, I want to thank you all and the board for your time on this. I think we're all trying to work towards the same thing. It's just getting there would be kind of the biggest problem. But in saying that, I do also think, I just got this new revised package as we walked in, and I would like to have time to go over it, as well as I'm sure a lot of the people that have sent in public comments, just to kind of review and make sure that we're all looking towards the same thing. I did have a couple of questions, like in the mitigation, it had quantity of trees to be removed, and then how many would need to go back, and then certain types of trees. And I'm not going to get into specifics, but like some say 7 different types of trees, 10 different types of trees. Are you going to specify, like, is that a canopy tree, an understory tree, or any tree? Because you do give examples like oak, magnolia, palm, or hickory. Like, I know, for instance, as a purchaser of landscape goods, like hickory's probably not a tree you can go out and buy. So, like, some of these things, I just don't know if it kind of makes sense, because if you're talking about true canopy trees, I don't know that there are 10 that would survive and do well on the island. Because as we're finding out right now, like, we plant a lot of magnolias, and I love magnolias, but there's not one job that we plant now that we don't have to get arbor care involved to help spray a beetle or a borer that's affecting the magnolias right now. So it's become kind of a maintenance thing. We're still planting them, but as we introduce more trees, I just want it to be made aware that on the island it is a severe microclimate, and it doesn't really take to all kinds of different trees being planted. And then on the mitigation, it's said to be planted on the lot or somewhere else deemed appropriate by the town. And it had like a warranty guarantee that was supposed to be applied towards the owner, builder, whoever. So if it wasn't planted on the lot and it was said to be planted somewhere else, how would you have the ability to warranty the tree if there wasn't like automated irrigation, things like that? Are you going to have like a tree bank where somebody can just pay money and y'all can plant trees as you want to? Because like as a contractor, to me, to have a job where you're planting a house and now you've got to go run around 25 different places and plant 25 trees that don't have water, they're not going to be alive in June the next day. So that would be kind of an issue. I saw like flooding, erosion, elevations with what we found lately in siting houses and elevations. We're trying to get them up as much as possible to prevent garage slab flooding. And in doing so, sometimes that does affect the elevation of certain trees. So, a lot of times as a design team, we spent countless hours, and I would even suggest it's five sessions because of the final. We're still reviewing trees at the final landscape walkthrough, which is 60 days prior to install. But with some elevations of where trees are and where houses need to go because of flooding and erosion, it's just one of those things where sometimes it's not as cut and dry as you've got to take this tree out, so you've got to mitigate it. Again, we just did a plan, and hopefully it got into ARB this week, but it's on Blue Heron, and there's 2 calculations. You have to save 70% of the trees on the lot for ARB and or 1 per 1,000 square feet. So 20,000 square foot lot, you need 20 trees at least. Well, we met that by a long shot, the square footage. On the percentage, we needed 19 trees. We were at like 61%. And because of the quantity of trees, it was 19 more trees. When I think on our calculations, there's well over 100 being saved on the job. So it's like, I've got a job site with 100 trees on it. I've got to find a place to put 19 more That's to meet just ARB guidelines. And in saying that, a lot of times we'll work directly with Jen and/or the ARB to say, look, we understand what's going on here. You've got a heavy canopy already. Let's try to find a way to reduce the quantity, but enlarge the caliper, say, or, you know, what types of trees and the size that goes back. Because this lot, for instance, is mainly pine. Well, to me, I'd rather get rid of more pine and add hardwood back in, you know, live oak, magnolia. There's not one on the lot. But, you know, to say you're going to plant an 8-inch live oak under a 100-something pine forest it's just not going to do what it wants to do. So I think there's a lot of language in here as far as the mitigation that needs to be kind of slowed down, looked at again, reviewed. Go ahead.
Maybe we should just add in the mitigation category that there'd be verbiage that says at the discretion of the planning director or his designee. So that under special circumstances where you're describing where there's already, you know, a large volume of trees that we could, then you could have that subjective discussion with the planning director, the tree preservation board, and that they could give you approval for less mitigation.
So I would need to meet with the director, the board, and ARB and make sure they're all on the same page?
Stands now, yeah.
Right.
So you, yeah, I mean, but instead of, you know, again, instead of having these absolute criteria, we would leave some discretion to the planning director. So if there were special circumstances. So again, each one of these columns under mitigation, we could use at the discretion.
Right. Like with ARB, like if I'm working with a client, you know, my job is to work with the client. So if she says no, my client says yes, you know, they have an appeal kind of hearing where we can go in front of the board. Are y'all going to have something like that, or is it going to be like no?
So right now, the intent would be for any type of appeal would go to that tree preservation board to be considered. So that process hasn't been flushed out. It would be a third arm of how we have any of our other quasi-judicial boards of an appeals process.
Okay. And I would second the notion that there needs to be some sort of tree grading, because a lot of the language says any tree over 24 inches. I know you excluded palm and pine, but, you know, there's another, you know, we just did a lot that has gorgeous live oak, and it had like 5 sweet gums growing up through it. And they were probably over 16-inch in caliber. But basically, they're to the detriment of the live oak. It doesn't look attractive. So I'm just trying to think, like on my client's behalf, if he says, I want to remove the sweet gums to show off this gorgeous live oak, where am I going to put all these other trees?
We added one section very briefly, maybe that can be beefed up, under that mitigation table in section E, that the grade of trees would be considered during those preservation requirements. So maybe you can modify that language, but. You're right.
Quality, yes.
Yes. I'm so sorry, the language probably was a little bit off. But
And that affects, you know, removals too, because we've been on sites where you have like an 18-inch live oak and it's just got one leader that's leaning over at a 45-degree angle. And, you know,
Section 2B3 is again, you know, an area that could possibly satisfy that, so that the density of the trees is great enough that removal of a tree would be beneficial to the overall area and health of a protected tree. So that's specifically to what you just said.
and that mitigation may not be required in that point, at that point? Or would mitigation be required still?
if we're adding that discretion, that's something I would want the commission to kind of clear it clearly when we have, but I think we hear the comment there.
Okay.
So-
And then, like, for instance, like on the, when we go through the process of ARB as a design team, and I feel like, again, I want to say, I like the process as that it is now. I'm not saying it can't get better or get changed, but I think we spend a lot of time specifically on the trees. I know the architects spend countless hours trying to figure out how to design a house to showcase a tree because the owners love that tree or whatever's on the lot. But like for clearing purposes, you're saying we go and we submit the plans to ARB, we get an ARB approval and kind of a clearing card, which general contractors in turn can go ahead and start clearing the lot while they're waiting on their permits. So is that something, when you said if ARB approves it, it's got to go back to you at zoning, is that right? Or, yeah, planning. So is that something that would change? Because I think that puts our clients way ahead of the game while they're waiting on their permits, which has been very lengthy as far as schedule. They can have the lot cleared, sitting there, and/or surcharged, whatever else it may need.
That would change in process, because right now, our ordinance dictated by our site plan review process would include site plan approval. So unless you're pulling a separate permit just to come in and do tree removal, then that would, as it's written today, would alter that process.
I think that would probably put, and I don't want to speak for general contractors, but that would probably put them in a bad situation with numerous owners and everything else. But that might be just something to look at.
I'm hearing what you're saying, just a quick thing, that we need to take a look at, I'm looking at K under mitigation, that we need to look at the alternative options, because your points are, that you can't just go plant a tree somewhere because you're not going to be able to maintain it, water it, whatever. So we need to relook at that. And for site clearing, the timing issue that when the ARB, after the tree survey is done, the ARB approves the plan, then you guys can come in and clear the site.
As of now.
As of, yeah, you did good to see you again. You did my house. Okay, so that's a timing issue, because our intent is not to, it takes long enough for an owner to get a house built anyway. Our intent of this is not to delay the process. So I think, and I understand that site clearing is something that happens early on, and there's a lot of work that can be done, that we don't want to slow that up.
No, we don't want to slow it up, but again, John's written in this that we do want to be involved at that. And so in 2B, he's saying that a zoning permit shall be required before any specimen or protected trees are removed. So, again, we can discuss that, but I think John and this tree ordinance, we want to be involved prior to any site clear.
I think it's finding that right trigger point of when in the process a homeowner, a contractor has submitted to ARB, and when that has received, quote unquote, a good enough blessing to begin site development. I think at that stage is what we would need to figure out how best that is infused in our current process in order to be receptive of that notion of the timeline, overall timeline. It's as simple as it is, having the town consider landscape and tree preservation standards, that may add time. But, as simple as it is, and maybe it's still adding time, it's just not adding significant amount of time.
Right.
So,
I think that's, again, we want to be involved. We want to be part of the process. We understand that the process is good, so we don't want to make it bad. But we do want to be in the process, but we don't want to delay things by months and months. But maybe if we could do it within 2 to 3 weeks, I think that's a reasonable goal. So I think the way it's written is that, yes, we want to be involved before there's site clearance.
And I just have 2 more things, but, one would be if we make it through ARB process and we're approved, and then we get back comments that, no, we need to add, say, 5 to 10 more trees. A lot of times we've already priced the project, the GC signed a contract, they're ready to start building the house, and then we've got to go back necessarily, make changes, add trees, whatever is going to be required by you all. So I'm just thinking if there's a way that we could move up anything that we need to kind of help us not make any more revisions, because I know myself and Chad, the first go-round is like the easiest now. And that's saying a lot, because now, I'm just saying there are tons of revisions being required, not only by ARB, but, the town, owners, whoever else. But revisions have become just this monotonous thing. So I'm just trying to get to a point where we don't get, you know, final approval. I've billed my client for design services, and then we get back a thing where, you know, I'm having to call them and tell them we need 20 more trees somewhere.
So, I mean, one of the things probably the commission can consider is that mitigation stage of the process. So maybe that could be potentially vetted at a later stage. I'm just thinking out loud here, but the mitigation requirements, so we receive that tree preservation plan that has which trees would be removed and saved, et cetera. But after that project has been submitted for review and approved, if it's been determined at that site plan review stage that additional mitigation would be required, and maybe that is totally opposite of what you just mentioned. Like I said, I'm thinking out loud here, which is probably not great. I'm just thinking of separating the review process in stages. I don't know how that complicates our current process now, but it's something maybe to consider.
Can't hear you?
You can use the mic for me, Chad.
A tool that might be useful in the process of evaluating what trees remain, what can stay, is the rough stake out of the house, which we do at preliminary. Essentially, the driveway, the pool, the decks, the heated space, the porches, everything gets rough staked out on the property. It's generally probably the best time to evaluate what trees are there, how well we're working with trees. It also sometimes illuminates that you've got a branch from a live oak coming right into something that you weren't quite anticipating. And then we generally end up talking about like how we prune that branch if we can, or do we adjust a setback? And so that appears to me to be probably the best time, because then it's easy to see what's happening on the ground and versus what's on paper.
I don't know what the relationship is with the town and ARB and whatever else, but I know that they have, like now they have a member of KICA that sits in on their reviews. I don't know if it's possible to have the tree guy sit in initially and make any kind of comments on the front end, so we're not waiting for a last minute thing that's going to change things and or slow down the process of general contractors getting their owners excited while we're waiting on permits to build this house. We can be clearing this lot, and a lot of times nowadays they do require a surcharge, so that's another, you know, month or whatever that dirt's got to just sit there on the lot when you can't really do anything. Last item was, you know, Jen and I have done this a number of times, but we'll also have due diligence owners who are looking to invest in very expensive lots, and they'll call us to have a meeting before they'll sign off with their broker or their real estate agent or whatever on purchasing a lot. And I don't know that we necessarily give them a concrete answer as to a tree removal, but we will give strong recommendations on, yes, you can fit a house here where you want to do it. The pool can go here, you know, kind of on and on. And Jen will actually write comments that I think can be part of closing documents to give that owner some, you know, relief about purchasing a very expensive piece of property. So I just want, it's not just like site analysis and preliminary review, but I mean, we're actually out there working with owners to help them find a lot that's suitable for the type of home that they build. And if, you know, I would feel awful if I pushed somebody into buying a house, we did, whoever, and then, you know, later we found out, no, you're not going to do that. So that was my last thing. But I would just, again, strongly recommend if a lot of us professionals could have the time to kind of review this, look through it, and send back any other comments.
How much time?
December 1st? 2 weeks? 3 weeks? I don't know. What's good enough?
Holiday, that makes sense.
I also think that I support his idea that somehow we should see if there's a way that we can cooperate with the ARB in the process so that there's less duplication.
I was going to pass that to Madeline, maybe add that to you guys' task force. I don't know if that's been considered already, but that's I thought was a one.
It has not yet been considered. It's a good thought, and there will be ample opportunity for public input into the plan that we're putting forward, probably within the next week. But remind me of it, because we're still adjusting some of our slides. So maybe we can scoot that in yet.
I thought this document,
Pardon me?
I thought this document came into effect when the ARB went away.
So our draft ordinance that we're,
ARB goes wet?
Went away.
No.
The ARB doesn't go away.
So we're talking about two entities doing the same thing. Different rules, but doing the same thing.
The status of the ARB is still undetermined.
We understand that. I'm not questioning when this document is intended to go effective.
you're talking about the tree ordinance or the separate document that
The whole document. You got the tree ordinance in here.
No, I thought you were referring to the work that the ARB task force group has been working on. That's what I thought you were referring to. So that's totally separate from what we're doing
This
today.
document
So this would be.
The
in
short answer
place-
is yes, Jen. It
includes
is. That'll be
a lot of other
two.
things besides.
The short answer is yes. When the ARB will continue their process, and this will be in effect, yes.
So you'll have a duplication,
I guess
as
that's what I
we've
said.
heard,
Ask
of
and answer.
a number of things all the way through.
Okay. Let me come back and talk to a little John and Stephanie a little bit. I'm thinking a little bit ahead and not anticipating, maybe a little bit, but if we table this to get their feedback, does when would we be able to consider that feedback in a special planning commission meeting prior to the putting a recommendation to the town, to the town council's agenda?
We would just poll you guys' availability.
Well, but we could do it before, I mean, that's what, December 1st is a good round number, but could we do it like November 29th, which is,
Wednesday, Matt, could you get us your input by the 27th?
yeah.
You know, that's almost too, I know Thanksgiving is
The
next
holiday
week.
involved, I don't.
It's the holiday.
That's
Yeah,
holiday.
it's-
Mine back, but what I would like to do is have input from the whole design community of Kiowa, because they're a lot smarter than I am, but I mean, they can, I read through the packet, and there's a lot of good information from a few, but I think if more people even knew about this, you would have a lot more comments than just who's here and who wrote it.
I have to agree with it. I think, so I was made aware, last week, and I think, I know that we've got a lot of team members that really would be interested, and they all have the same goal that you do, and I would love the opportunity to pull those people together and have our own roundtable. It's gonna be in support of the intent, for sure. But we'd love to get some feedback, so we wanna make sure that what happens is good. And Thanksgiving's tough. I just don't know how we're gonna get folks together.
So, yeah, I think
We
if you
can
guys look at your
always-
calendars, because if you guys are still trying to hit the December town council meeting date, it's more than likely will not.
December, which, December?
Town council, I think, meets on December 5th. Is that the first
We meet the
Tuesday?
5th, we meet the 6th.
Yeah, so based on this, I don't think that you'll be able to hit the December 5th date. So council can have other special call meetings. But if they're saying that if December 1st is the date, can you go to this, so December 1st, if they're saying they can't,
Friday,
right,
December 1st is Friday.
yeah.
So if they could get their comments by the 29th, then we could have either a workshop, then meeting.
special call.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Ron. I think, and we appreciate the more time you get, the better comments we can get, but we are under, we have some time constraints that that we're going to try to get to. So,
I'm just gonna throw this out, is there any way, if we were able to get the word out and pack it out to design professionals, is there any way that we could have a roundtable discussion here?
That's what we're.
Sure. 29th,
And
yeah, workshop.
if you get us on the first.
So you're saying on
2 weeks from
Twenty-
today.
Oh,
If you could do it on the 20, you're saying you want to have all your people with roundtable with us, or just you want the
That-
space for your own group, which you,
have you all hear from more than just us, because I think
So,
this is a great representation. I mean, you have a contractor, and arborist, landscape architects, and architects, but I do think that there's a lot more interest in this than just this small little group. If we could get out something that says we're gonna have a meeting at town on the 29th to hear everyone's concerns, all the team members that work out here, I think you'd see all the interest and probably hear a lot more comments.
I was going to recommend
29th
potentially.
is fine for me. It's my birthday, but that's okay. John's working on his birthday.
But I want everyone to,
if he doesn't bring a cake, you can.
I was actually going to propose, even if, because town council can also have a special call. So if we were to utilize the 6th, that would just be the day after town council meets. And then that way, the following week, you can have a recommendation to council.
well, I think they
If
can
that-
still meet on the 29th, but I
Yeah.
don't think it's going to get on council agenda by the 5th.
That's-
Because
that
if they
was-
meet on the 29th, by the time we have to try to get everything together, we're not going to be able to get it on the agenda by the 5th.
Okay, accepting that. So
They're going to have a
here-
special call meeting.
This is what I'm hearing. This is a recommendation that we have another, what do we call this? A workshop on the 29th, that we circle back on the 29th. Then based on the 29th, we would have our meeting on the 6th, and we would use the 6th to make a recommendation to town council, and they could have a special meeting afterwards to act on that.
They would have to have a public hearing, which is, it can be on the same day as their first reading, and then they have to have second reading.
Okay.
Now, in regards to having to, how much notice do you have to give to be able to advertise? So I would have to
We
poll
need
council.
15 days for.
Right, we have to have 15 days. So if we start counting, I would just have to then say to council, I need to poll to make sure that I have a majority. So it's 15 calendar days, right?
15 days for what notice?
Notice that we
For the
have to
public
notice
hearing.
for ordinances.
For ordinance.
And public hearing, sorry. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we even go from today, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You're looking at
Now,
the
here,
second
I've
week
got
of
a calendar
December.
pulled up.
So that's the 30th, but we don't want, so if we want to say, be able to have on the 12th, and I'll poll them on the 12th, then that's fine, because then we have to be able to advertise that they do on the 12th. But it's,
I mean, we don't have
But
to
that'd
make a
be
decision
fine.
right now, but we can poll that in.
yeah, we can work out the dates for the public hearing and first reading.
Just to clarify, for the workshop for the 29th, if we were to send out this packet, are you all gonna make any more revisions to this?
Yeah, we're going to make some revisions. We are going to make some.
Any way we can get that, so we can, so we're.
Yeah,
not
so,
talking about this week
so
I agree.
the idea, I think, is gonna actually potentially make, or even if our subcommittee wants to meet again, as well,
I can't wait.
we can do that with a few members from this group before the full commission meets again to iron out additional comments before, but, we'll make revisions to this based on what we heard today.
Right.
Because I'd like to just, whatever's the latest, I'd like to send out to them, so.
Okay.
We're not talking about something we're not
So you need it by what, the 27th?
in advance.
Okay, so we're,
We don't have major revisions today. Is that doable, John?
I want to ask some questions before the notes that I've written down, I want to at least ask some general questions back to the commission of things that I've heard today to make sure that those were sort of in line of revisions for the next iteration.
Yeah, and you know, how we're going to revise that alternative mitigation. We got to talk about that.
That's why I recommended our subcommittee getting back together.
But you also have another issue. How do we get word out? Clearly, all of the people now who are here obviously know about it. Everybody else who should be interested, including those who go to the ARB regularly, or those who don't go to the ARB but do tree removals.
We'll
How do we get the word out to
send
them?
another letter out. We send the initial meeting to every registered license in our Citizen Serve portfolio. We'll do another one of those of the 29th, advertising
Including the
that.
pruners and everybody else.
But it was every
Tree
tree contractor, landscape architect should have received that email.
Yeah. Appreciate the help. That would be helpful.
That would be great.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
I think it was, but we could, I'll check. I don't know if general builders were involved in that first initial wave, but I'll. Okay. Okay.
They have the biggest client relationship.
Okay.
Okay.
Noted.
Okay, I'll let you ask your questions, but I just want to make sure I got this locked down. We're going to get back together on the 29th for another, what do we call it, workshop. And our intent then would be to have a finished document for the entire planning commission to vote on, to send to town council on the 6th. Okay?
I'm working on those today, tomorrow. I'm gonna I don't want to put something on the record right now.
All right, well, I'm just saying, like, it would be helpful as much notice as possible, because this is
Yeah.
a bit packed.
Before we, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, just as part of that consideration, before you put a date out there, if I could do that, those test case scenarios.
Sure.
With this, or using this ordinance language, and send it to.
Well, could you do the same thing you did with us on Monday and have have the subcommittee meet with you again? And you had those nice cartoons that we were able to look at.
Yeah, I could do that Monday or Tuesday next week.
Oh, wonderful.
And then maybe following that meeting, the revised draft could go out, if there are any changes.
That would be helpful so that we have as much of the latest amount of feedback. I think that assessment will influence the document again, so maybe we send it out the most recent immediately after that. I don't.
So it might be a week in advance, and I know there's Thanksgiving in there, but.
Ron and Joanne, I had a,
Hopefully, if we can get that thing by
Yeah.
Tuesday or Wednesday next week, people may read it ahead of trying to eat.
Hey, whoa.
you guys
Wait a minute.
stay away from tryptophan. That makes you sleepy.
That's going to the task force. It doesn't go to the full planning commission.
Not till the 29th.
Then that's got to go to get a revision. We'll get it when they get it.
We'll
which
still
is the
push
20
out the most recent revisions.
The earliest
as
can be
soon
the
as we get it.
27th.
Not necessarily. 22nd, yeah. Because by that time, what we'll be doing, we'll only be focusing on because by that time, we should have incorporated everything we've heard
You're gonna
thus
give-
far.
you're gonna
Hold on a
send-
second, hold
oh,
on a second. And then, so at that time, we should only be dealing with the changes that that Jen would point out. Then we should have it done.
And whatever other changes John wants.
But he'll have that done before then, because that's the document that you're going to be working from. Okay?
So just maybe to level set with everybody, I've been taking copious notes. The things I heard that
You can lean into your mic just a little.
things that I heard that really came up as issues that pretty much everybody agreed around. Well, the tree survey at the very beginning from Chad was one that I resonated with. But the design process and the timeline for the design process, then the approval process and the timeline for the approval process, mitigation and the flexibility within mitigation around number of trees, types of trees, health of trees, canopy, all of that. And then lastly, ARB town coordination, what happens with dissent, what happens with appeals, and then going back into that timeline. Is there anything else that you guys thought of that I didn't capture?
I would just think an early review of lots and things and how that happens is kind of important.
Put that in the survey part, because that's what the survey is the initial count of the trees.
If they plan to have any say on it, there needs to be some coordination for ownership, to be able to have some peace around purchasing a big piece of property. Yeah.
It's just, I think there are two things. There's the site analysis component, which is after you usually bought the property. But this is a tricky situation. This buying a property, we're very frequently stepping on pieces of property with potential buyers as a service to help them understand, get confident, or to help them understand that, no,
Again,
it's going to be limited.
When this document's finalized, you'll have this document, so you'll still have the information that you'll need to do that pre-purchase review.
And you're doing that.
I think what Scott's talking about is the 2 weeks ago, I think in our community, there was a knee-jerk reaction. We were like, oh my God, how are we going to work here?
Well, we're still having it with the casino.
Yeah, and the real negative effects, so using the county as an example, if let's say you go, if you went with the process as it kind of stands, where the tree removal approval happens after we're done doing construction documents, there's a lot of money wrapped up in that, and a lot of time, and having to redesign a house, that's like doubling the architectural fees, the engineering fees, the everything.
Well, that's why I
Ted, I think we heard that.
No, that's what I was kind of
With
reflecting.
ARB
I was reflecting. But
jointly makes the most sense.
yeah, but I think moving it up in the timeline and figuring out how the how we help take this information, communicate to the client how they can live on that property, what their aspirations are, how they see themselves living on that property. Then say they're buying the property, we're working with Jen at the site analysis level, looking at the trees, the health of the trees, the types of trees, and you get into conceptual design. And somewhere between conceptual design and preliminary submittal, those two submittals, somewhere in there is probably the ideal time for us to get at least initial approval of tree removal. Maybe you do it as a two-step thing where we get an initial approval, and then you just kind of when everything's done, are we removing the same trees essentially?
I think that's what I said in the approval process.
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
But I think, again, the task force, we're not trying to be more restrictive than ARB. We're trying to be less restrictive. We're trying to codify it so it's a standard. And if Jen and her team approves it, we would probably 95% of the time approve it without even thinking about it, right?
That's the intent, the goal.
That'd be great. But we were just scared.
But I don't know that there is a quantify, some of it is a little bit of having a freedom.
Jen stated earlier, the difference when you use may versus shall creates a big discrepancy or the difference in what we're dealing with here. And so,
I mean, again, you can help by putting in words like discretion.
ARB town.
The discretion of the
What
planning.
happens when there becomes a new tree?
Elimination.
Well, planning else, but then it says it.
She can do that.
One thing in your coordination comment, I think, no one here would, in that side of the room would object if you put in duplication as part of the issue. Not only a question of coordination, it's a question of whether or not we need a duplicate process.
We can beat that horse to death, and we are, given this task, and we're gonna do this task.
Andy, and discussion we had last time, is that's not our purview. If you think that shouldn't be done, you gotta go to the town council, because they're the ones who gave us the task.
Point of recommendation.
And you're gonna get,
Whether we recommend it, or we put it on the shelf, or we don't recommend approval.
Okay, well, let me say that I'm sure that if it went to a vote, you would not recommend it. But we've got 6 other members of the planning committee.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason the town council, and it's been pointed out to us that a council member 3 years ago has been trying to push for this because the town has no recourse to protect trees.
And
And this is the whole impetus that we were told we need an ordinance because the ARB, we don't control them and they can't do it. So we were given this task.
The only point is that was our task. We're doing our task.
can I ask questions? Just, so in some of the comments, many of them were Mr. McDonald's, but, so one of the comments was about our live oaks using the designation of 16 inches, made it sound like that's onerous. So what would be a reasonable alternative?
Was it, well, I can't remember all the numbers, so I
Is
apologize. 16,
we sort of said anything over
I was
16.
more worried about outside the buildable setback than I was in. Or maybe it's the verse, it's just, sorry, I don't have all the numbers in my head. I thought we had, like, I was looking at the survey, and surveying everything above 8 inches kind of makes sense.
Well, the way we review a site analysis is we label everything green that's a live oak or a hardwood that's 12 to 18 inches. Anything over 24, we mark as red, and we evaluate it if it's in the buildable or outside of the buildable. But that 12 to 18 is one of those things where we actually review each tree. We go find it, look at it, and say, well, that's definitely, no good. Or that's definitely something we need to consider keeping, figuring out. But we'll look at everything between 12 and 18. And over 24, if it's in the buildable, it's over the way. If it's outside of the buildable, it's
But
really
the
not.
determination isn't based on size alone, it's based on
Quality.
quality.
That was one of my other questions.
The extent of the canopy.
A couple of comments have been about having a grading of trees, A through D or whatever. And that's, again, not something that I would be able to do by any means. So where do we get the recommendations on how to set up a grading of trees? What's B?
Maybe Danny or Sammy could speak to that, because they're arborists, and they could provide more information than I.
Name is Danny Milliman with Arbor Care.
Just hit that button on that mic for me. Yeah.
Danny Milliman with Arbor Care Tree. I want to thank everybody for having this meeting and having everybody here. So to answer the question on the grading of trees, this is something that we do quite often on a lot of the projects, the majority of the projects on Kiowa, Cassique, Seabrook. We deal with them with Charleston County, City of Charleston, generally depending on where you're at, whether it's a grand tree, protected tree, that type of thing. But the grading scale is generally like a similar school grading scale of an A to an F. An A would be like an excellent specimen type tree. Excellent overall health specimen type tree. A B would be an above average type tree. A tree in very good health, good size, good form, good structure, no major, structural defects. C would be an average tree that's probably got some bumps and bruises, but nothing major to cause liability. And then a D tree is generally one that's diseased, major defects, decay, storm damage, that kind of thing that could be a liability to build around. And then an F is generally a completely failed tree, dead, lightning struck, just, completely not worth saving. So that is one thing that we've worked with the ARB, a lot of the people in the design teams, initially when we're doing the initial site visits to identify some trees that may be in the buildable area or out of the buildable area that are in poor condition or good condition, to try to figure out how they're going to design around trees that we want to keep, or not to design around trees that could be a potential liability.
Do you use the type of tree in there, in that process, rather than just health and?
Yes, so generally, we're not grading every palm tree, or every pine tree, outside of the buildable area or inside. Most commonly, it's with the hardwoods, more valuable hardwoods that are, in general, that 16 to 20 inch and bigger, type tree.
So also mostly a liability issue?
We're trying to identify liability issues. We're also trying to identify potential, things to help with design. Elevations of where the trees are at versus, high elevations if the elevation needs to come down on that specific lot, or if the tree is in a very low elevation where the house is going to be high and dealing with drainage. We're trying to identify as many of those factors as we can to help the design team to design a house where that tree is going to live, if it's a tree that's worth saving, and, design around it to minimize any impacts to it.
Yeah, I think, we know the A's are going to be kept, the F's are going to be kicked out.
It's the C's and B's,
Yeah.
and D's that are usually what you're You're exactly right. Usually the A's, you're like, okay, that one's, designing around it, and then it's those C's and B's. If you're trying to figure out the design, the layout of the house, size.
Would the recurrent arborist make that determination? or-
Generally, yes, a certified arborist, which I am, my brother is, both certified, and that question came up earlier about certification. So, a certified arborist is an international, certification. It's not a state thing like the state pesticide or some of the different engineering things. It is an international, certification through ISA. And so you have to take a test, be educated, continue education and stay certified to keep that. So we do these types of, tree grading and lot assessment, generally with the architects, the ARB and landscape architects, in most of the site meetings where we're figuring that out. If we have specific concerns on specific trees that are a challenge, then we generally dive into those a little bit deeper to try to give the architect some time to figure out foundation, elevations, roof lines, that kind of thing, to both determine critical root zone impact, how much we're impacting below ground with the foundation, and then also canopy, what you're going to be left with, if the house is placed here, roof line, elevations, that kind of thing. That is definitely a daily, weekly thing that we work with design teams in the ARB on.
It's an international certification. How do we verify?
There's a website. It's International Society of Arboriculture, where you can literally go to the website, look up arborists, or if someone gives you a certification number, you can verify a certified arborist, both by name, business. You can look up, say, in the state of South Carolina or Johns Island, Charleston, certified arborists.
John's going to be able to verify that.
Yeah, and I can help with, given, how to find that pretty easily.
I would think so. That would be the easy way to do it.
Okay, assuming we can certify these guys, Madeline's got one.
How early in the entire design process, the whole permitting process, are you involved in that?
Generally at the beginning. We do get called along with the architects and landscape architects sometimes at purchase of property. What, on design, kind of lay out a big thing with Kiowa is what kind of view am I going to get on this lot? What potentially, can we have when we build a house here? That's one of the main things when people are purchasing lots at, the prices is what is our view going to, what is reasonable? So we're involved at that capacity, initial design through the end of the project. Where we're a little bit different than a lot of the design team that's here is we're both involved at the beginning and then on the maintenance side of it, where we're kind of split. So some of my questions, I was kind of waiting for the design team to get through their design stuff and questions on that. I've got a few questions on just the existing residential homes with trees that might need to be removed on that permitting process. Because in general, when we need to remove a tree, that meets the requirements that the ARB has, we're sending in documentation, their tree removal form, generally pictures of a tree that may need to be removed, what defects it has, if it has disease. And if we need to write a tree report on it, an assessment, and grade that tree, we're sending that in. We don't do that on every tree because some of them are very obvious, a dead tree.
Yes.
And we don't need to do a big, extensive report generally on those. So my question would be, on the residential side, if we need to, say, remove a 16-inch oak tree that's a laurel oak that's got disease but has a green canopy and is leaning near the house, what does our process look like for us, for the average homeowner that might be concerned about that?
Do you ever get a requirement to, in a removal issue, do you ever get a requirement to submit a site survey?
Not generally on residential, if it's just existing and just maintenance
Affect
stuff.
any coverage area?
If they're due,
Not one.
pardon?
Doesn't affect the coverage area of the.
That's generally what the ARB is looking at, is what that, might affect if that tree comes out. And that's where their mitigation generally can come into play.
Right.
But generally, if it's an addition, a renovation, a landscape redo, then that form along with the ARB requirements for the addition, landscape,
Jen brought that up in our meeting on
Yeah,
Monday,
so-
and we changed our language to note from
Yeah,
notification.
So, yeah, that was one of the things of what would be a required permit versus non-required permit. And so in this particular section, what we did was made 2 qualifiers. Those trees which would be dead, diseased, or damaged, hazardous, those could be removed without.
Notification, that's what you were talking about
notification.
earlier, right?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sort of surprised we changed 2, though, to not require a permit. Because I thought, the rationale for changing 1 was because we didn't want to delay the process at all. We didn't, because.
but remember we did have a discussion on the town being at liability or risk if there is a tree that's causing damage and they're applying for a permit and then that particular tree is not removed in time because a permit was submitted.
Well, I thought that was more kind of covered in 1 where you said hazardous or clearly causing damage to the property. Whereas 2, I thought was more for, Right, yeah, the driveway's got a bump in it
Okay.
now because, there's a crack because of a root, and
That
that's
may-
why I thought,
we can
in
flip
1,
that
we
then.
we just want notification, and I thought, again, we had talked about having some supporting photographs or documents from the arborist, even for 1, but 2, I thought we were still thinking about keeping as a permit required.
Yeah, let me ask that, Danny, you'll get a copy of this again when we revise it.
Yeah,
Take a
that
look
was
at it.
my question, is if we're, doing that with the ARB, we then send it into the town of Kiowa, and double up essentially on.
When you send it to Jen, you would send it to us as well. That would be the idea.
Okay, and what about fees? Has there been any discussion if there's going to be fees associated with like a, tree removal permit from the town?
Government.
That's what I get, the reason I'm asking is because I don't want to tell people a price to remove a tree and then have to go back to them and say, we have a fee on this, we didn't have a fee on that, so it's just,
So we did not discuss it extensively as any additional particular fees of per tree removal.
right.
In our last update of our planning and zoning fee schedule, we did apply, I think it's a $75 permit reprieve for tree removal. That's just for the permit application.
Yep.
But we haven't gone that.
Yeah,
deep
obviously,
into
once all
surveys.
this is figured out, that'll be
Correct.
kind of
My
finalized.
inclination is I don't think we want to add fees.
It would be part of the,
Yeah.
So you might get one week, and then if the owner calls and says, why aren't you out here working, we're gonna.
Well, it's actually not approval, it's.
Notification.
Notification.
Or
So
for the-
You send it, go ahead and start doing the work.
These are for the clearly
That's
ones.
for Ed, Dan.
Hazardous. that type.
just notify.
Right,
So
right.
there's a different
Picture in.
process if it's not hazardous, we'll want a permit, but for anything that actually represents a risk, mirror the ARB with just notification and some photos.
So if they send it to both groups at the same time, they can start the work?
Sure, there's
Yeah,
no
it's
approval.
not
There's no
required.
approval.
There's no approval.
Yeah, it's notification, not approval, but if it's not in sense, what I'm hearing is it's not a liability tree.
Yeah.
Then we would need approval, not just notification, which is the same way it's been, it's just, we would be doing it for
And
both.
just be sure to send pictures in with the note,
Right, yeah, and generally, if I did that, I'd probably just copy send, the exact same thing.
Exactly.
But you did say on most existing homes, your issue is liability.
Yes, it's that, or we also, that was gonna be that's the number one thing, is timeline on that. The other thing is, we work on a lot of existing landscapes where there is a lot planted. At the beginning, things start to die out, lack of sunlight, compete. You have some trees that get out competed by other trees and start to thin out. And there are the occasional times where some trees needed to be deleted because of the planting at the beginning, to allow the other trees that are competing well to thrive, survive, fill out, keep buffers where we need our buffers, keep privacy, because that is a big thing on the island, for everybody wants their privacy in between homes to where they're not looking at their neighbors, kitchen window, bed, to somebody else's. And we do have situations where some of the plantings are thinning out some of the others and causing the loss of screening, where, just replanting more is not the answer. So that is where I think it would fall into, we would send in for approval, have a letter like we do with the ARB, if that's the case, with the ARB, and go through the same process, just with Town of Keuka.
You'd send that approval letter after you got it to town.
Right, that's what I
Well, I
guess,
think-
And you can begin to work when you get the approval.
right.
So I think as the ordinance is written right now, under those circumstances, we're going to want them to get a permit.
Yeah, that's an individual tree
board,
removal.
Through our board that we're,
Yes.
Talk about that this afternoon.
I hope not this afternoon.
Well, you can't call until 1 o'clock.
No, it's 11:30, it was immediately after.
Another question that I have relates to pruning, specifically the beech trust and like dune pruning stuff that I don't know if you guys, is that something that crosses over at all with the Town of Kiowa versus ARB, Kika, Resort?
Pruning, because dune pruning is mostly wax myrtles.
Well, there's just verbiage in about like not topping trees, which I agree with the exception of some of the beachfront, like beach places where we're shaping down myrtles annually, some of the dune oaks that don't grow very tall, where you're basically shaping down the new growth every year, that type of thing, and that's something that we've had to both get permitted through ARB.
Be regular,
Yeah.
kind of regular maintenance.
Well, that is regular maintenance that we've had to get approval for in the past, and I just wanted to make sure there wasn't another layer of
So our
that we need to go through.
ordinance is written would exempt that
Okay.
from approval. That's the-
All right.
What about the timing issue where this word's in here about growth season? In terms of the ability to service the requirements during that.
Very good question. There are specific times that we do that beech trust pruning, which we're coming up on the start of that now in the winter when things are more dormant. We're not in nesting season with birds. It's better for the tree growth, and less impactful to them. You don't want to do that necessarily type of trimming in the heat of the summer when it's 90 degrees and we might have a drought. So there is timelines both with Kika, that owns part of that property, ARB, in that beach trust area where we're doing it in the winter months in specific times that it's got to be completed.
Those are more of what I would call a hardwood trees. What about palms?
Palms, we trim year-round. The majority of the trees we can trim year-round. We don't have the different wilts, funguses that you have in the Northeast, out in Texas. Like if you're pruning in the spring, you can introduce wilt into a pruning wound. We don't have that here luckily. We have a very long growing season. We're able to prune, the majority of the health pruning, maintenance pruning can be done annually. So it's not really time dependent on that, in terms of the health of the trees.
We gotta be more specific. We just have a blanket statement in here about timing.
Right, in maintenance pruning, pruning palm trees, pruning the dead fronds, the seed pods, that kind of stuff. We found that a lot of that is dependent on the homeowners and the clients and when they're on the island, when they're not full-time. Because there's a lot of people that are here for specific times of the year and they'd like their yard to look nice, for that time that they're there. And it's not the same for everyone. One other question I had related to the topping would be, have you guys had a discussion on crepe myrtles and topping of crepe myrtles? Because that's kind of can be a controversial discussion, on crepe myrtle versus not. That is not something that we are, broad scale, like wide brush saying, yes, do that to every tree, or no, don't do that to every tree. Our stance on it is they are one of the few trees that you can keep at a certain size. That's one of the reasons why the landscape architects and people that design put them in certain areas, because you can, keep them within a certain space, if done properly, and at the right time of the year. So that's one question I had with that topping, is that including crepe myrtles, excluding crepe myrtles? Is there going to be any more discussion on that? Because that is something that a lot of landscapers just go out and, tell people they need to prune their crepe myrtles, and then they're cut out at, 6 foot tall or 8 foot tall, or however tall the ladder is.
I read it said it didn't really apply because the branches where you're gonna cut them don't really reach that 6-inch diameter.
So it's
You're cutting it at
7.1, you could put an exception for crepe myrtles.
That's just something from a maintenance side that I saw in there, and, it wouldn't hurt that.
7-1 is about pruning.
We can add, if we didn't go into the level of species in any of these for the general, but we can add those specific, if they're recommendations.
Well, it definitely doesn't fall into, there's not a crepe myrtle I've pruned yet on Kiowa that you're cutting 6-inch or larger limbs, on.
In my mind, I still would put that into the regular maintenance category, but unless you guys as the experts see otherwise.
Well, the only thing is it violates the 25% of the leaf surface.
It does, but technically, if you're doing it at the right time, all the.
No, it's.
Actually comes back more vigorous if you.
We can add crepe myrtles to that. Yeah, we can.
I do that as an exception.
Yeah.
It's more vigorous.
If you think it.
So I guess one of the questions that I haven't heard discussed yet was, there's been discussion about sightlines. And what I think the design with nature, we're not supposed to remove trees outside the buildable area for sightline purpose. But yet again, it sounds like it is being done.
Well, once the home is framed and we have an on-site meeting to look at what the actual sightlines are and what vegetation is impacting them.
Okay. So, because I guess I've read it, and maybe it's not Designs with Nature, maybe it's one of these other municipalities that we read, but somewhere there was a fairly specific language that said tree removal for the purpose of altering sightlines was not acceptable, was not a reason to remove trees. Or it sounds like, at least, there's been some subjectivity.
Would there be thoughts for like relocation and those types of things?
I understand that. That's why I brought it up for a discussion. I wanted to hear.
Yeah, it's very common, and that's the process, which is we'll take a look at that site before the development. We have an idea of where the views are going to be. People are absolutely buying for the view. And then the ARB has the process, and with it's outside of the buildable area, it's not touched until the house is completely framed. We get together with the landscape architect, the builder, walk that property as it's framed. We have some ideas. We'll typically have the client come back with us and we'll say, here's what we think makes sense. So we're guiding them, and they're going to have their opinions on what they like. Then we have the ARB representative come out, and they either share what we agree with what we think or not, but it's never wholesale pruning. It is very sort of precise removal to get views that you will be able to achieve. And what Jen has been great at doing is expressing the value of near trees, providing a foreground sort of element and not just wholesale cutting, so you get this broad, long view. And that's something that's been sort of learned over time, that really works and actually enhances the value. So definitely removing for sight lines, but having the combination of trees is really where the magic starts to happen. And it's been very successful.
That's what you mentioned is in the deed. After you get the ARB sign off, before you get any other approvals, that language is in the deed that they're allowed some language in the deed.
It's not in the deed, it's just part of due diligence documents. It might be part of their closing documents. Okay.
Sounds like it's a very subjective process.
It is subjective.
I mean, the way it's written is very subjective, and
The gym works to get the view that the owners want, and we, instead of like a wholesale view, like Scott's saying, we kind of work towards more of like windows in your house, but that's windows in the view. So we work to get you a primary view and whatever else you may want, but we're working hardest to get the primary and then.
I think we're gonna need to have a section in the ordinance that permits tree removal in a limited fashion.
Well, I think that's something that should be kicked up to the.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And I
I mean, I still think outside the footprint, you know, even if it's in view, we don't want certain protected trees taken down. There are always going to be, I think, given the topography of our island, a lot of palms and pines. And those can be selectively taken down, but I don't think, you know, when someone is looking at a lot, if there is a big specimen, live oak or whatever, that's, you know, right on the marsh or wherever they're looking at, that tree should stay. And that's something they should know when they're looking at it. But, oh, you've got a bunch of palms and pines, and yeah, maybe we can do some thinning there.
That's very much how the process works right now.
Yeah, you're exactly.
I think you got to.
But should there be something in the ordinance, you know, to protect the buyers and to take some of the liability off you guys? Should there be something in the ordinance to require real estate companies to disclose that there's a tree ordinance and the sightlines may be obscured to a certain extent, or you can't, you know, where do you guys think that comes?
I don't think we can control the real estate people. I mean, they already don't disclose a lot of things you don't find out till after you buy anyway.
Well, if we make it an ordinance, they'd have to, or we'd pull their license.
Mr. Farrell, we had a brief conversation on what would happen once this ordinance in place. And the idea, the thinking today is that on a number of ordinances that we've had in the past that changes based on our current practices requires a lot of education and a lot of informant too. So I think we can do in-house, bring in all of the design teams and to share that. We can bring in real estate agents to understand, hey, these are the new impacts. This is the new process that's being now administered. And so this is what we expect you to educate all of your new homeowners, et cetera. Putting in the ordinance would be something I'll chat with Joe about to see that particular, if that's something possible. But that's currently thinking is that we really just need to educate folks on, hey, this is a new day, new expectations on approval process. The town is now has a tree preservation ordinance, so we need you guys to understand that in your full, from the time you walk or see a property to the time you begin to sign documents, be aware that, hey, the town is inserted into that process.
The way we can do that, though, is, and it could be with tree pruning, it could be with any issue. If the ordinance comes out, the license is issued, at the time the license is issued, you hand the brochure or whatever folder you have to the licensee and say, okay, here's what your license covers and requires. And based on the ordinance, you may have to, excuse me, you may have to revise it a couple of times as you change the ordinance, but you put them on notice. You can't control them, but you put them on notice. Okay?
Let me, because we've got to, we announced 11:30 is.
Got one more.
Got two more quick
Okay, come on,
questions
sure,
that I'd like to bring up, if you
Yeah,
don't
please.
mind.
I'm sorry, I thought you.
One, no, quite fine. One is, you guys were talking about taking the pine trees and palm trees off of like the overall. One suggestion I would have is look at adding sweet gum trees to that in terms of their value to the lot versus other trees that are on the property. That would be a strong recommendation from me. Generally, they're quick growing. They do provide some shade in some instances. They've got the sweet gum balls that are generally an issue for everybody around driveways, sidewalks, decks. We've got a lot of better quality trees, you know, on the island naturally that I tend to like to preserve more than the sweet gum. So that's one thought in terms of the species that you guys looked at. Another thing that I just wanted to go back to the design process on, you guys have a lot of great verbiage in about canopy preservation and critical root area, 25%, or less. That's kind of the industry standard, which you guys are probably looking through several tree ordinances. That is pretty much the industry standard. I just wanted to make a couple of points on that. One being that is the goal with every, design, is to have 25% or less, because that pretty much says that the tree's not going to be overly impacted in root or canopy to where it's going to severely, affect it long-term. But we have been involved in many projects out here where it's been above that 25% line, with additional, things from the design end and treatments and things that we can do to help save a tree that's worth saving, where we're impacting a little bit more than 25%, either canopy or critical root area. That being things like working with the architects on doing spot piers and bridging footings to where they're not just cutting a continuous footer and eliminating all the roots, where we're still closer to the tree but preserving more roots in it. That's something that the ARB takes into account with some of those percentages. That doing fertilization treatments to the roots to help thicken up and multiply the root area in the spot where it's not going to be impacted. Treating the trees for beetles to make sure that they're not stressed during construction, and then having an insect coming in and, causing decline in the tree. A lot of those things kind of go in step with the design process recommendations when we're at that 25% line or possibly a little bit over. That is a great marker to shoot for, but I guess my recommendation would be to have a little bit of verbiage in there to where there's a little bit of flexibility in gray area, where it's not just 25% or less and we got to remove this tree. Because there's a lot of homeowners where they want to keep the tree, but to make the footprint work in the house, we've got to fudge a little bit over that. And there have been a few trees that have died, but the majority are still alive today and are beautiful trees that are providing, screening, canopy coverage, that are great additions to the house, in the property. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
We had a lot of conversation on that on Monday.
I don't have it open to that page, but.
At the bottom.
Right.
That's what we were just looking at. I mean, again, that kind of goes with paving. That needs to have a little bit of gray area, because a lot of times we'll work around trees, but they'll be right on the driveway, or we'll bridge the footing of a
We
house.
had discussed on Monday maybe changing that 10 to 5 feet.
Well, that, and also like if you're making room for the building, doing bridge footers, a driveway has to come, or a parking space on some side because you have to have it. And then the design team's looking at doing gravel or pervious, in that area. That's a different impact, in my opinion, to the root system, because you're not severing it, cutting it, eliminating it. And that's where these other treatments, aeration, fertilization, that kind of thing helps the tree get through that to establish through that short period where there's a change, where you can keep the tree versus just saying, here's a clear-cut line and you got to not do this or, remove the tree. Mm-hmm.
With the goal of preserving 25% or more of the leaf surface, and the goal of not paving within 5 feet of the base of the tree. So rather than making it hard and fast, that would be what we described.
Yeah, and along with, everybody else, just kind of reading through this when we got here, was there anything in here about drainage with the new construct? Because I know that is also a big part of what we, not to say that that needs to go in here, but that's also. And maybe it doesn't, but I know that is a big part of our, site evaluation on where the driveway is gonna go, garage elevation, where trees elevation are, making sure that we're not funneling water towards these grand trees that we're trying to save, or the trees that are specimen trees that we're building around and making sure the drainage works.
Rain gardens like we want.
It's a lot of different things, yes.
So Ron,
Okay.
Was that, and that's part of, I think, what they're trying to capture with this paving agreement within 10 feet,
Mm-hmm.
right? It needs to be sensitive to the tree, whatever that.
And you also said, if it's only 25% of the circumference, that's a lot different than if it's 75% of the circumference. So,
Yeah.
so again, that's why I think we need to have it a little bit as a goal, somewhat subjective, so that it's not a hard and fast rule.
so Jen, this is a personal question, but I have a driveway that needs to be replaced. And I have probably a 16 or 18-inch live oak. 16 or 18-inch live oak that's within 2 feet of the driveway. It's very healthy, it's doing great. How do you think about replacing that driveway?
It would be fine, because the root impact is only on one side of the tree. And that's part of this, this percentage or pie,
Yep.
If you think of the 100% circle root zone of the.
360 degrees.
Yeah, and so what we've talked about is, as long as you're not more than 2 sides of, this is your trunk. Then what we found over the past 15 years is that the tree will be fine.
So if you can have a second
Yeah, do you agree?
Yeah, most instances where you have that existing driveway, the tree's it's got roots going under the driveway, filling out in other places to get water, nutrients, air, but generally, it's filling out in other places with its feeder roots, not under the concrete or the asphalt. So it is kind of adjusted over time. It's a root system where it's capturing food, water, air, all that to keep the tree alive. So where that can change is if you have to remove specific additional roots, if you don't have to get into removing any of the roots or a lot of the roots to do the driveway, then generally you've got very minimal impact.
Well, the good news is the tree is leaning toward the driveway, so the root bed is really on the far side.
And
away
that
from
is
it.
a very good point, and that's one of the evaluations that we're generally doing on these on-site is that is a big part of, tree leaning this way, more roots on the backside to anchor, different tree species, have shallower roots, tap roots, all that type of stuff that we're taking into consideration depending on the design and location.
So that's where the goal language would be good, to allow for instances where 10 foot is not required. If there's an existing driveway and you're replacing it, that tree is not going to be any more negatively impacted than it already is.
Write the exception in for you specifically, and
Yeah.
then IKEA would have a great, have
Brace tree, the ELF exception, and they won't know what it is.
I'll give you back your brace. You braced the tree on Sweet Gum when we put the new water line in about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's still there.
Okay.
You want to take it out? You can have it.
And,
Actually going into the street.
I know each one of us could probably have some individual.
Yeah, I apologize.
Consultant.
I apologize. It's-
Yeah, so, I want to make sure, has everybody got kind of what they wanted today? I know you're going to have a lot more when this comes out and we get you the stuff on whatever day it was, 21st or 22nd.
I just wanted, so one of the public comments, and I think it was Mr. McDonald, felt that we should have different ordinance for single-family versus multifamily. Is that also a feeling of anyone else? 'Cause
Yes.
I don't think we're necessarily all in agreement with that.
I guess my feeling, Ron, would be, yeah, if there's a reason, if 90% of the ordinance applies to both, why duplicate, for the 10%? Now, if
No,
you're 10
Mr. McDonald was saying he thought there should be,
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I said, is that if 90% of an ordinance covers both, why write one for, just for the 10% exceptions?
well, I don't think we should, but I always wanted to see
Oh,
what.
got it. I'm sorry. Okay.
the audience-
So, answer my question, and I'll say if there's is the buildable area the same as the footprint?
No, we specifically, that was something we discussed.
Take a
So,
break
so
and
that's where I
work
have a
on the-
concern.
work
That's
on
where I
the
have a
table.
concern, is that, you know, if the buildable area, they can come in and clear cut and take everything down, but they're gonna have huge space, lot 13 and lot 10. You know, you can take, they can take out specimen trees or even ice trees.
We-
Just clear cut the whole thing so they can park their construction vehicles, like they did at the Cape. So if you take, make it separate so that it's not just the, it's not the buildable area, but it's the site plan or the.
That's what we did. We made it the,
that in
we
here, the
we
footprint?
changed the word from buildable area to footprint. And the ARB, there's one line on multifamily housing that says it shall comply with the same rules as single-family housing. So
I'm sorry, I missed that in here. Can you tell me where it is so I can reread that, or?
So that wasn't in our
It's not
ordinance,
in
but
our-
it's in the design guidelines of the Architectural Review Board.
No, but one of the change, we definitely changed buildable area to footprint.
No, but we don't have a statement about multifamily versus
No,
single family.
no, because we assumed like the ARB, it's the same.
So on page 8, there, you,
Like I said, Mr. McDonald's wrong. It was his comment that he thought they should have basically
the table right here, Luke, if you look up.
different standards for multifamily versus single family.
Public's not coming to the meeting. Public's not coming to the meeting.
Per animal in terms of how much
Like-
vehicle access.
Makes it easy.
But multifamily can be very, can actually be smaller than a single family residence. And it depends on the overall development plot, right, of how much is covered.
I just think it, from our standpoint, you know, and I just wanted to bring it up for discussion, because I don't think we want to have two different standards.
There might be considerations based on, but I agree, maybe not two different completely standards, but I think there are elements of each, single-family versus multifamily, that maybe we need to dive more deeply into what might be some of those implications.
So that's what exactly what I'm getting at. And with this on page 8, my thinking is the space that's outside the building footprint, but within the buildable area. That space, what happens there?
Well, that's what we were
That's-
discussing. And, you know, Jim made a
So,
good point that, while there's a lot of trees there that we want to preserve, there's also a need for construction equipment, traffic to be able to build a home. So some of those trees are going to need to be removed.
Thinking about the developments.
But we didn't want,
Family
what our goal was, we didn't want blanket approval of everything in the buildable area. That's why we changed it. And then we can, where they say, look, we got to get the tractors in here and we have to take these trees down, fine. But they can't just clear cut everything in the buildable area.
Well, I'll have to, I understand what you're saying. I'll have to read this again because I don't read that.
Well, I think this needs work still, the table.
Yeah, under the tree removal for construction activity, I'm still focused on that outside the building footprint, within the buildable area. You've got the whole area and you've got the footprint, but the space in between is,
Yeah, because there's the footprint, and then there's going to be space in the quote-unquote buildable area. The buildable area is everything within the setback,
yep.
okay?
Everything outside the footprint.
So everything
No space in
between the
between.
setback and the footprint, it needs approval to take trees down.
In the top of the table, the second column down, protected trees, and we can debate whether that's 8 or 12, but that still says outside the buildable area. And again, I think what we want that to say is outside the footprint of the structure.
Footprint, yeah.
I did it in the, so it's in the second half of that where you see,
We've got two different things. So this
Gotcha.
is individual tree removal. So this is a home that's built, this is Andy's house. He wants to remove a tree outside, it's outside of the buildable area.
Outside of the footprint.
So, so that's the difference, because we treat it as existing development of post-occupancy, that footprint is already gonna be occupied. And so you that,
Yeah, footprint's different than buildable area.
No, but I'm saying before the home is already developed. So for the new construction, outside the buildable area is the setbacks and buffers.
right.
For the home that's already built, is outside the buildable area now just outside the footprint? Or is it still?
No. We're not we aren't changing the definition. What I'm saying is, we kind of looked at it two separate processes, and if it needs to, I think there needs to be added a little clarity language-wise, but someone in an existing lot wants to remove a tree inside the buildable area, we know that footprint is already occupied because you have a structure there. So saying outside the footprint, you're really not accomplishing anything.
The problem is, this would apply,
The buffer.
It still could be inside the setbacks and buffers.
But we.
Outside the buildable area is out. So you're saying adding something in for.
Be outside the footprint.
Within the buildable area, outside the building footprint is what you're.
Just outside the footprint.
Those are all protected.
and that's the trouble with combining existing properties versus properties getting a site plan approval.
Well, if they're inside the setbacks, they're inside the buildable area. I mean, they're setbacks. So anything inside the setback is technically buildable area.
Survey based on determining whether it's in the setbacks.
Yeah, so for existing properties, if they want to do a renovation, add a deck, extend their property.
Renovation, removal.
Any change to an existing property that wanted to take out a tree that is between their house and their setback would need approval. Would be what,
And require mitigation.
And require mitigation.
And that's the key.
But what if they didn't have, like, that's the question I think you're getting at, is what if they didn't have a survey?
They have to get a survey.
So you're gonna get a survey to get approval to
To
get
know
a tree
which,
We did talk about not having.
If they want to change something on their
It's like
existing
a
property.
$2,500 thing to get a survey to make sure that that's
That's
inside
only
or
just on the
outside.
project that they're talking about.
I think
No,
the
I see.
difference
Let me get one at a time so we make sure we get.
within the building. Right. But like, I'm saying, that's, my question is, how do you know it's within the building?
They should have, every property should have a survey and show where their setbacks are. You have, when you buy a
A lot of
house,
people don't have a site plan or it's.
don't they have to have a survey when you buy a house? You have a survey.
It's not outside.
Yeah, but I don't think the survey necessarily has like where a tree is versus.
No, but they have where the setbacks are.
Yeah,
but Joanne, they do have maybe an as-built survey, but that doesn't show trees.
No, but it shows setback.
Right, but
But you don't have to
in
have a survey.
order to determine whether or not you need town approval to remove a tree,
so,
you would need to know where that tree is.
and we're saying this isn't because the tree is dying or dead or diseased, right? This is a healthy tree that's over 8 inches, or we can make it over 12 inches. So yeah, I want to know why they want to remove a healthy tree that's not damaging their structure, that's not diseased, it's not dead, it's not hazardous. So this is a perfectly good tree. Why are they removing it?
I can give you an example of what that
I'm
would.
assuming somebody's gonna wanna take trees down on it
Let's say you're putting in a pool.
without a damaged tree or.
Without construction.
That's a renovation.
So, and we have a different table that talks about what's needed for changes. Okay, so that's a different conversation. So we're not talking about, this is an individual tree, okay? It says individual tree, post-occupancy. This is a house that's been built, it's occupied, and it's a tree.
Yeah, I think immediately at the end of this thing, so I don't think there was a firm.
It's at 11:30.
The agenda was set 11, they're immediately following this. So what we can do is, if there are substantial questions, what we can do is adjourn this, particular workshop, open up our 11:30 meeting. And I think you can have a discussion on
Just to keep us according to the rules.
You stay right here.
So, I'm obviously not very good at running a meeting. I'm not very good at running a meeting, but I've got experts here who keep me on.
Move we close the workshop.
What's that?
I move we adjourn the workshop.
We have a motion to close the workshop. Do I have a second? Second, all in favor? Aye, okay.
Now you can call the,
All right, do we have
call the
to?
meeting to order.
You call the special call.
special meeting to order.
Okay. I'm sorry, dear? Me? And then we're gonna start the, thank you, guys. Thanks so much. Thanks for spending. Okay, calling back to order the specially called Planning Commission meeting. We have one agenda item, and that's to review, to determine whether we want to take the draft tree or to vote to move the draft tree preservation ordinance and recommend it to town council. That's old business. There are no public comments. I guess I got to say there's no public comments.
So whatever.
I mean, much as you know, I want to move this thing along. Given the discussions this morning, we did get some very valuable input from professionals. I think we all heard some new information. So we had discussed doing another workshop on November 29th with the idea then to refer it by our December 6th meeting. I think maybe that's the way we should go.
I would just add to that to confirm all the dates.
Turn your mic on.
From that standpoint, once we agree, we can adjourn the meeting. But we do have a draft that's got to come back after your task force meeting to the committee. We should have a date for that. We should have a firm date for that. We should have a date for the workshop and a date for the PC meeting, spelled out specifically as to what the agenda item is going to be.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with Andy that we ought to have a timeline for all these steps we're talking about.
I think we have, we just have to confirm. But I don't think we can, it's not a motion, I mean, that's.
No,
No,
but
it's
we're
none
talking
of it
about a
was.
workshop on the 29th.
Yeah,
We
so
need to do a subcommittee
so the only
meeting
thing,
before
the
that.
only action item I would say first, I mean, we can technically do that after, but we just need to make a formal motion to table the ordinance for approval. We can set, I've heard the 29th. I just want to make sure maybe, does the morning kind of work for everyone? We can continue to do the morning of the 29th. I'll put that out because I know Bill is in here as well, but looking at the 29th. And then with the expectation is that workshop will inform our decision for recommendation on the December meeting. That would be the date that we make a recommendation to council.
Well, let me, if I can finish my statement, this will add to this.
Okay.
The last part of my statement was the timeline should include the ability for you
Right.
to get these minutes out to the contractors, and then the contractors get their response back to us before the 29th.
Awesome.
So that would be what would be need to be included. And then we can have a valid workshop or meeting on the 29th. And I also think that, assuming that we have those dates and we agree on those dates, that 15 days before the town council meeting, we put that on the town council's agenda. So that should happen on or around the 21st or 20th, right?
Luke, just to clarify, when you say the minutes, you're talking about a summary of the meeting?
New ordinance, sorry.
A revised draft,
Revised draft.
Yeah.
Of the workshop,
So again, I want to go back and say,
Ordinance, revised draft of the ordinance.
new draft.
Yes.
I would send them two things. I'd send them, one, a summary of the workshop. You do that even now. And then when I assume we're going to have a task force meeting to consider today's comments, to
That's the
revise the
29th.
draft,
29th.
That's the 29th.
but that
So
was the next.
when are you
going to get the draft? Who's going to do the draft? Just John?
So the draft will be revised. I would like to have our subcommittee meet so that they're on the same page and on a number of the issues that were discussed today.
okay,
Before,
let me bring out, for Madeline's purpose, what we've got we don't have the motion yet to table it yet, do we?
Correct.
Okay, okay. So what we're discussing is establishing a timeline in order to complete the task of getting this to recommendation of town council. The timeline that I had written down, that John was reading, you want to go back through it? Why don't you do it, John, since you're the guy who's going to
so before I then go through the entire timeline, just as a summary, I just want to be able to make sure maybe next week, early next week, that the subcommittee would be able to meet with the revised draft, so that
And Jen.
And.
She was gonna do,
because
she was
we-
gonna,
We did mention that to have that exercise be done.
So when do you want to do that?
21st, I've got, we talked about the 21st.
What day of the week is it?
That's Tuesday.
Tuesday, the 21st, okay, I can work around that.
Okay. Any morning or afternoon qualification? I'm, it's Jen. When are you available on? Are you available on the 21st and you have a morning or afternoon preference?
I'm available at 11 a.m.
Okay.
All right, you want
The
to say
11?
11 a.m. on the 21st?
Okay.
Does that works for you, Ron?
Thank you.
That
So,
works?
Thanks so much.
all right, so just as an overall timeline, now, the subcommittee, even before the subcommittee, I'm working on making as many edits as I can today and tomorrow to be able to just send that back out to the entire commission as quickly so that they can kind of begin to think of all the things that they've heard in addition to us coming back together on the 29th. Next week on the 21st, our subcommittee will review in detail any particular implications that might be brought forth with this new revised draft, and/or what was already shared by some of the feedback today. On the 29th, we said morning, so hopefully that, well, we'll keep maybe a 9 o'clock start time. And then by the end of that workshop, today we did 2.5 hours. We can schedule another 2.5 hours if needed. But the expectation is for us to have this December 6th, to have our ordinance recommended to council, or some type of recommendation to
And
council.
December 6th is our regularly scheduled.
A regularly scheduled
planning
planning commission meeting.
Will we get the revised task force or the revised draft after the task force meeting before the 29th meeting?
Yes.
How soon? I'd like a date on that.
So given if there are no substantive things after the 21st meeting, and maybe I'll have conversations with Jen to maybe anticipate what might some of those potential changes be just in conversation, and I think that will inform the draft to be more rigid than a loose draft before the 29th meeting. But I would say the 22nd would be that date, and the goal would get everything back to everyone.
That's perfect. That's aspirational, but it's important. One thing, John, is you were going to send out the updates as you're doing them today to the commission.
Correct. So
Would you like their feedback before the 29th, kind of, so you can incorporate it when you try to put out the 22nd? In other words, if he's going to put out a update on the 22nd, if you've got comments that you'd like to have considered, you should get it to him before, as soon as possible.
For the 29th?
Oh, we can, yeah.
For the 29th.
Yeah.
You would like, you said, when you say go through the document again.
Yeah, I mean, you sent this yesterday after you went through it. I got some things. I mean, nothing significant except mostly the tape.
That's why we wanted our subcommittee to get back together.
I think he's saying that that's the subject of the 21st.
That's fine. I mean, subcommission, if you guys would want to begin to discuss some of these so that informs, that helps me. I can begin to redline as we talk.
I can do. I'm available.
Make a motion, we table the agenda item calling for approval of the text of the zoning amendment.
Discussion? Okay. Well, thank you. I've got 4 people telling me how to run a meeting now. So, thanks. No, that's fine.
Do you want a motion to go back into a workshop, or you just want to talk?
So I would say if you guys want to continue discussion, I would say just hold a table vote until.
You have a motion and a second. Call for the vote.
All in favor of the motion and seconded motion? Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are now so we've gone through the items, so now we're actually into commissioners' comments, I think, right? So we're in,
Well, yes.
Yeah, because on a special call meeting, you can't do anything other than what's on.
okay, so we're in commissioners' comments.
So Ron, if that would be, if you want to make your comment.
I have some comments on the draft, the 1113. On page 3, is also photographs and supporting documents from an artist. And then, as we discussed very briefly in the workshop, I think number 2, C2, should still be a permit required.
Awesome, okay.
So you want to pull that from C? Because C is permit should not be required, so you want to,
So pull it back to the B. Yes.
That I'd just add, whatever they submit, not specify. Just say if, and documents if required, or and attachments if required. Because there's a one-page approval required to be filled out. And then sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they put in documents and pictures, whatever. So just say 2, if required, or if,
as required.
no, if attached.
I don't understand what you're saying here then.
So he's saying for permit, for the circumstances where a permit's required, that there are also attachments.
The baby. Again, you're talking tree removal here.
So,
But the problem is,
there's a complementary ordinance that falls under our 162, which is what would be submitted if they're applying for a zoning permit. And so that particular, we can expand it in that section of what would be required under tree removal documentations, just like we do in site plan review.
well, since you asked the question, is this going to cover tree removal on existing properties?
This ordinance, yes.
It is. Then I go back to my first comment, not to steal Ron's time, but first comment in proposed purpose and intent. Again, this is standards in the first line, standards for both existing and new developments. What's an existing development?
An existing home,
Is it any property?
an improved property, so that would include a new single-family home, a multifamily, or
Oh, I'm asking.
commercial, anything that's been
Development is not
improved.
an existing, doesn't cover an existing house.
So existing would mean that it's been an already approved project that's that's been built.
You could eliminate that whole, you can eliminate the whole phrase. If you want to make this specific to just one, you got to specify that. If you want to cover both, I think you've got to be a lot more specific throughout the rest of the document to cover both. But this, right now, if you're going to make standards for both existing and new developments, existing has to be existing properties, not new development, not an existing development.
So you want to add the word properties in there?
Yeah.
Opposed to developments using the word existing and new,
But
existing.
I would suggest that you don't want to combine the two for a lot of reasons, which come up as you go through the document. A lot of unintended consequences where they don't, the statements or the comments don't apply to existing properties. Some cases they might, other cases they might with exception. It's just to the point where you are so muddled in worried about clear lot clearance that you've got the wrong objective when it comes to existing properties and how you're going to get there. It has nothing to do, clear cutting only applies with respect to areas that you cover in here very clearly, new development on that lot and major renovation.
Okay, again, bring me back to speak, because I'm having, what do you want to change?
Right, you want to start? You want to wait? Wait till the workshop, or I'll,
Yeah, let's do it at the workshop.
I've got
Ron had a-
comments on every page.
I think what Andy's saying, and I'm in agreement with Andy, is just for clarity, I think this is what you're saying, is it should say something like,
Where, now, what do you,
the second line of the very first page, purpose and
purpose and
intent.
intent?
He's trying to describe, make sure this clear, it is for existing vacant lots, existing residential houses, existing developments, new developments, and maybe even golf course and open space. That covers explicitly all the property on Kiowa.
So when you, my hesitation is when you begin to name, you tend to probably leave one out, opposed to leaving it more broadly of both existing and new. But, so if you say existing properties and new developments, I think that
The other
captures
option
everyone.
is all properties on Kiowa.
We can do that.
Those are the two options, just enumerate all of them. But I agree with this one, it makes me think of existing and new townhouses.
So
and
just to that question then, if you read this applicability and exemption, that first clause, does that read the same way? Or is that, when we say including all properties with, all real property within the municipal limits for both residential and non-residential?
To be clear, you've got to say existing undeveloped properties.
See, I think that's what he's bringing up the point that he does not want this ordinance to include existing properties. So he doesn't want the tree ordinance to be applicable to his house and lot.
Not in its entirety. I have no problem with an ordinance.
Only he wants the bulk of this to be about new development.
I think,
All to be.
That I would disagree with.
Well, I would say, okay, thanks for your input, Andy.
Oh, I'd have a separate ordinance or tree.
I can't remember, when we got 5 or 6 ordinances from different other, I can't remember any other municipality having a separate one as you're recommending it. This is consistent with 5 or 6 municipalities in the area.
So I think, go back to Andy's comments, I agree to make sure that it's clear that it's not just about developments, it's about all properties, so you can change the wording whatever you want. I disagree with Andy's comments that this should only be about new development. I want this, and that was what I said before, is this gonna be for multifamily and single family? Yes, this is all inclusive.
so then I would make this,
Existing home or whether it's a new development, this ordinance is gonna pertain.
so I hear the comments about making distinctions between new and existing, because I do think there's some differences that can be at play. So then what I would say is in that purpose and intent, we can state that this is intended to apply to all properties. And then
That's a
once
good
you,
way to
and then once you get into wherever that may not be applied to a existing, then you can make those exceptions or whatnot. Is that,
Good for me.
Okay with that.
Here for a while.
Don't punish us, Andy.
Punishing you.
So, I don't know if this is, I just wanted to discuss the tables primarily. Why don't we start with the second table?
Page 5?
Page 8.
Which, there's one on page 5.
Right, well, we can start there if you want.
No, I don't know. It's your.
just, when you all just reference the page number so everybody can kind of follow along where you are.
So on page 5, you changed the footnotes pretty significantly. You changed the definition of major improvement. And I just want to get your, I want to know.
I tried to capture what I heard at the last meeting. If I veered way off, then let me know. But what I kind of heard was that the existing definition in our code of using substantial improvement based on the 50% value was, for lack of a better word, is problematic. And so what this new revised sort of definition here just takes major improvement and minor improvement and categorizes major as any particular renovation, repair, restructuring, alteration that's going to essentially change the footprint of the home or creates earth disturbing activity greater than 25% of the lot. So it doesn't tie it to a value of the property, it ties it more so to actually what might be the improvement on the site.
So the concern I have here is, like, I like this. I could see somebody saying, I'm gonna go in and clear cut the lot, a vacant lot, or, you know, existing lot. I'm gonna clear cut it. I'm not gonna disturb the earth. I'm just gonna go in and cut the trees down, take the trees off. How do you?
But he needs a tree permit to do that.
So this table is about what is required. So a tree survey, a tree preservation plan, a landscape plan. So any new construction requires all three of those.
But what if they separate the construction from just clearing the lot? I'm gonna clear the lot today and I'm gonna build 3 years down.
Yeah, but you still need a
You need
permit.
you need a disturbance, you need a permit to clear the lot.
We say you can't cut a tree unless we've got these, we got requirements where you can't go in there.
Okay, I'm not making that linkage, I apologize.
Well,
If it's there, and you guys tell me it's there,
So the idea of this particular ordinance is focused on tree preservation. So if someone does have the intent to remove trees, this is why we're creating this ordinance. So this table is just saying what documents would be needed as part of the process, looking at new construction versus major and minor improvements.
wouldn't you want a tree survey if they're just gonna cut the trees down off the
so
lot?
required permits, the removal of any, this is 2B. So he's basically saying no protected or specimen tree can be removed on any site prior to the issuance of a zoning permit by the town.
Go in and clear a lot without a permit.
2B,
Remember, add the page number to help everyone.
page 2.
Okay, okay.
Page 2, 2B. It's basically saying you can't remove any significant tree, protected or specimen tree, on any site prior to issuance of a zoning permit.
But a tree survey is not required to do that.
You know, I think this is just a blanket statement, sort of saying you can't remove a tree.
Right.
So the right.
And then the table goes into what's required as far as the survey, preservation plan, or landscape. That's what the table is about. So any new construction, and I guess your question is, well, what if there's no plans for construction? Well, if there's no plans for construction, you still need to have a zoning permit to remove any tree.
So let me ask you a question, Luke, then. But you're concerned about a survey not being required for a major improvement, that if someone is asking to add a pool or,
I'm thinking more about just a vacant lot, it's there, and somebody's planning ahead, and are they getting around anything by getting a tree removal permit and going in and cutting down trees? Without a survey, without you having the ability to see what are they doing?
so that would be called new construction, and that would require.
I'm saying they're separating that.
Yeah, but if they just have a lot and they come for a tree permit and we see that it's a vacant lot, I think you can say, you can't just take any tree down. What's your plan to build? You need a tree survey. I mean, there are all those requirements.
I agree. Where does it say
Yeah,
you need a tree
it's
survey?
not-
Well,
where you
we're
get-
we're gonna be able to say to them, no, we're not gonna let you take any
No.
trees
So
down.
the-
I don't think that's I don't think anyone's gonna.
I go back to what.
Nobody's gonna
Johnny-
go out and survey, come on.
I go back to what Dr. Kern
Nobody's going
is.
out every time you get a tree removal.
So somebody comes in here and asks John for a permit to take down 10, 20 trees.
One tree,
Vacant lot.
one tree, 2 trees.
Well, let him go 10 or 20. Go ahead.
So, I mean, again, you know, it says, we're not gonna allow any significant trees, protected or specimen trees, so anything over 8 inches, any tree over 8-inch diameter is gonna require a permit. So somebody's gonna come in, ask for a permit for 10 trees to be removed from this vacant lot. I mean, clearly, that's gonna raise a red flag, and John's gonna be, the first question is, why? And the guy's like, well, I'm not planning construction, but I just don't like trees. So, I mean, I don't know,
I think it's covered.
I think it's
Just raising
covered.
it.
I mean, it's
Well,
not
if you look-
explicitly said, but
Look at footnote 4 on the table. minor improvement, he has the right to ask for it.
Landscape plan, not a tree
Tree
survey.
survey.
If you guys want to add the caveat that discretion of all three of these documents could be requested upon determination by the planning director, I mean, that would be another catch-all. So right now, we've only given that discretion for a landscape plan, as Mr. Capelli just stated, but if you're saying a survey or
Request for multiple tree removal requires tree survey, tree preservation plan. So any request for multiple tree removal will require a tree survey and tree preservation.
Where is it necessary to worry about multiple except in new construction?
Want to add to their house.
Wait a minute, let Ron answer. That's different.
We're, you know, like I said, we're trying to be all-inclusive, okay? And you're not gonna catch every cat. So Luke's brought up sort of a very unusual circumstance where somebody's trying to get around the system. He's saying, this is somebody who's got plans to construct, you know, a major home or whatever, and he just isn't gonna do it right now, but he is gonna cut down all the trees right now. So, okay, so maybe that's kind of unusual to start with, but, you know, okay, so.
what would be the
Then
add to this
answer is-
particular table or
The answer
change?
is, if you do that without a permit, you fine them.
They get a permit. They can
And
get
they
a permit.
remediate.
So my ad would be on page 5, table XX, maybe make it minor improvement and lot preparation, or minor improvement and vacant lots. And then it's not required.
That a tree survey is required for,
Well, that means it's not required. If you want it to be required, you could put it
so.
major improvement and lot
So I
preparation.
want to be clear, when do you want a tree survey required? That's the question. Because right now, it's only required for essentially new construction.
He said, so you catch it if you put.
Construction and lot preparation.
If you put, yeah, instead of just minor.
Under new construction lot
New
preparation.
construction.
Yeah, on the first, second column.
Yeah, because they're gonna do new construction, but they're just preparing the lot, so that would catch it. If you guys agree, if you guys don't
Edit
agree,
here.
then that's fine. Lot preparation.
Okay.
So we've taken care of that? No, good. So I guess to go back to my original question to John about changing footnote 1. So we aren't required, because when we discussed this in the past, you said we kind of were stuck with the definition of major improvement in our previous code.
We weren't stuck with it.
50%.
Yeah, we weren't stuck with it. We chose to use it because it was already in the code defining it. No, we didn't, we don't, we can pull whatever we want in this one. We can make it, but we used it because it was already available, but then you brought up the point that, you know, 50% of a $4 million home allows for a lot of, you know, a lot of disturbance and trees to be done. So we wanted we wanted something to narrow it down. We wanted to get more practical, I guess, is what we're trying to do.
So is that still in here, the 50%?
25% of ground cover or disturbance.
The 50%'s in the zoning, is in our zoning regulations that says, if you're gonna do 50% of the value of the home, you gotta bring it up to current code. That's what that's defined as, and that's defined a major, that's what's defined as a major improvement.
So, yeah,
That's got to do
I'm
with
just
the flood, the whole
disconnecting
flood zone thing, you know, where
the
that comes
value, the monetary component to it, and made it more applicable to the actual renovation type.
All right, so we've got a new definition for major improvement, and all major improvement will require a tree preservation plan and landscape plan. And then minor improvements, anything that doesn't change the footprint or doesn't change the lot. And we're gonna require the footnote number 2 for a tree preservation plan if there's gonna be removal of any specimen or protected trees.
Yeah, and I went back and forth on that one, that change, just noting some of the conversation of, well, if this is an existing home, do they need to do a full-on tree preservation plan opposed to just saying this tree is being removed with these mitigation requirements. So that can be something that maybe is detailed of what,
I like footnote number 2. That was, again, we were trying to catch, so we had used value, we had used footprint, and then we finally said, well, we also want to just use any improvement that requires removal of protected accessory trees. So that's what the purpose of footnote 2 was. So I think it's good. I think the only thing is you don't, now that you've rewritten the definition of 1, you don't need to have the footprint of the structure is being modified. Because that would move it into major improvements. You follow me?
So after period, would be after protected trees?
Correct. Because by definition, the way you've now defined
Yes.
major improvement, that would move
Two
any
is,
minor improvement into major improvement.
two is redundant.
No, not redundant, just the last half of 2.
or any-
That is the definition of major improvement.
right.
And then the same thing for 3. Well, three now is somewhat, so again, by saying a footprint of the structure is being modified, that now moves it into major improvement.
So,
So you don't need 3. You just need to have 4.
so we can eliminate bullet point 3 is what,
So you can eliminate footnote number 3.
the difference is that one of those was for tree preservation plan and one was for a landscape plan.
Right, but again, landscape plan will be required for improvement where the footprint of the structure is being modified. By definition, if the footprint
Yeah.
of the structure is being modified, is now a major improvement based on your new definition. And so by definition, all major improvements are going to require a tree preservation plan and landscape.
Correct.
So it becomes 3.
So, yeah, we don't need 3.
Footnote 2 and footnote 4 under the minor improvement.
4 has been modified.
Yes,
What's the language you have in 4 now, John?
So 4 has now become 3 because we eliminated that, but it says, at the discretion of the planning director, a landscape plan may be required for any improvement which has been determined to create a potential impact.
But I thought you said we added
just
or a
changed
tree, and or a tree survey.
So, or a tree survey.
And or, whatever, how
Or.
it reads, yeah.
and on page 8, we discussed this in the workshop, we're going to change the tree root zone to 5 feet instead of 10 feet.
Right.
Put in the second sentence about paving and grading.
Jen, is it,
Based on the circumference.
yeah, Jen, I just wanted, is that 5 feet consistent with what you use? Because it's more restrictive. This is where if you use 10, because this would be, we're trying to keep it where we're not more restrictive. So it's something for you to think about, because if we move it to 5 feet, then there could be a situation where we're at odds with each other.
Let me think
Yeah.
about it. One thought I had was, would be to say, to change it from base to, well, no.
Yeah, you don't have to come over now. Bring it.
We can talk about it.
Bring it up on next, bring
Our-
it next week, yeah.
And that was also an area where we, a goal of not paving or grading within 5 feet of the base of the tree or around 50%.
Oh, change it to a goal, yeah.
Tree circumference.
So you change that to a goal as opposed to a requirement.
Yeah, and then 8A, we use that significant again, we gotta change that to protected.
He's resisting that. That's about the third time you brought that up.
Wait, where, I'm sorry.
On,
I see it now.
Eight, yeah, you got it.
Before you jump off that 7, based on a comment on tree pruning, he said there's got to be some flexibility in there because they generally don't use the 25% in every case or mandated in every case. It depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, and that's again, you thought about changing that as a goal, and then also putting in the exception of the myrtles.
Grape myrtles, yeah.
Yep.
I thought he also said,
So if,
comes.
That was for removal, not pruning. That was for removal, not pruning. Peak gums, they want to be able to remove. They weren't going to prune. them.
Removal, not trim?
Yeah, no,
That's fine. You want to put it in removal? Put it in removal.
like what we're doing. However, it would be, I know you guys made comments, and I'm trying to make those edits as we go. If there's a way to come down the chain of following the exact document, that'd be a little helpful. Following the document, but if you have your comments not necessarily in order, that's totally fine. But that just reference to me where what section of that ordinance that we're jumping to.
You want to go through the whole thing now, or should we?
I just really wanted the big things.
You're going to do
Yeah,
your,
because we get the comments from everyone in writing that you can look at, and then when we meet with the subcommittee on the
agree.
21st and then the group on the 29th, rather than, we've been here 3.5 hours already.
Well, this process though helps John to get this out by tomorrow.
I really wanted your big takeaways from what you might have heard today in the updated draft. So if there isn't anything, I'm not saying from new comments that will be submitted, but things that you heard today that would be substantially changing what we already have. That's kind of what I wanted to do in this last quick session.
So while we're on table 8, I have one, and we heard it, and it was one of my concerns, is the DBH mitigation at 100%. If you take down a 24-inch tree, you're planting 6 4-inch trees, you know, you might have, as they talked, you got 110 trees on the lot already. I don't know what the mitigation should be. But it seems like 100%.
We took out palms and pines so that you don't have to mitigate for those. That was a biggie that he wasn't aware of.
I'd put in, that's where I'd put in sweet gum.
If there were the circumstances where there's, 120 trees in a lot, and there's ample coverage, like.
Okay with that,
So if
yeah.
we put in sort of underneath every column of mitigation with the discretion of the planning.
Which is, Jen, what you do too, right? I mean, you use discretion about tree removal, or is that hard and fast for the mitigation?
No, there's discretion. I use the 70%, as, as a guideline.
Yeah, but when we take out the pines, the palms, and the sweet gums, that they don't have to be mitigated, we're really focusing on the protected trees.
Which is what the ARB does as well. Yeah, there are higher.
So to go back to your example, so a 24-inch live oak, you have to cut it down. We want you to do 100% mitigation, except if there's 20 other live oaks that
On that
provide adequate canopy so that you don't really need all that mitigation. Or you have no property left after you build to put more than 2 or 3 new trees. So I think that's where it becomes subjective and at the discretion of the
Yeah,
planner.
you can either continue to add the discretion to all those, or consider lowering the 100% to, I don't know, 80, or dropping that number down so it's not 100%, some other.
I don't know that there's a magic number.
Leave it at 100 and add discretion.
You have the opposite, where Luke has a 24-inch tree and that's his only tree.
Yeah, if
In
I've,
which case, then we want, he's got plenty of open land, then we do want all 100%.
yeah.
The question I bring up is, Jen's requirement is only 70%. this is a place where we're more restrictive than Jen is.
If I recall, it's only for grand trees that are inch, and then the others is actually a tree count, so that's another difference than what, the 70% is the actual 70% of the number of trees opposed to the inch, caliber inch.
Before you jump off that, if you're not requiring mitigation on a tree removal, why are we requiring a permit to remove it?
So we are, so I guess that's where you're reading this table as new construction. And the top half of this table.
No, this would apply to both. The way it's written,
Top half of this table is about individual tree removal. So
but the comment, Ron, the comment makes it a point that you don't require mitigation on this. Why would it require mitigation on a approved property for removal?
I don't see that we have a distinction.
It says it doesn't, why is it not required here, but required, may be required on a removal?
It is saying, we have an individual tree removed from an occupied home. So one tree being removed from a developed lot that's occupied, and it says right there, must replant.
Where are you reading from?
The second column of.
Back on the table again.
Second row.
Second row.
Page 8.
So these are post-occupancy individual tree removal. So I read that as a developed property, somebody wants to take down a tree.
But now you're telling me back here, it only applies when you're
Back where?
clearing the lot.
Back where?
On C. Next page.
Palm trees, palmetto and pine trees within the buildable area should not be require mitigation.
I'll kind of explain this. So section 8 begins with A that kind of gives an overall description of what mitigation standards would be. This chart, this table explains those based on the tree type and context or location. And then underneath that, we continue with what might be exceptions to those or additions to. So you have the base requirement of what those mitigation standards are, and then it adds a little bit more detail. For example, B says that mitigation trees that are required to be replaced shall be in addition to. C is that exception for those different types of trees that won't be counted towards required mitigation. So palms, pines, sweet gums now that we've added. The types of mitigation trees as far as the size. So those final comments underneath that table, if we need to add them in the table, is what that helps clarify. We can do that. But those particular standards, those contexts after the table, just provide a little more clarity or exceptions to what the mitigation requirements would be.
You got to be clear, because right now, you read that if it's not listed in table XX, which an individual tree removal most likely would not be, you don't get to C.
But, I mean, A is the table. If you continue to read, B is the next sort of thing. So I think you'll get there. But
It's part of the same thing.
it's all under section 8. That's what I'm saying.
But it
so if you-
applies, right, and A says mitigation, and you look at the table, and then B, C, D, all apply to the mitigation area.
Right.
And it tells you mitigation's not required for those trees.
Of
So
those
that
specific
applies-
trees.
Right, that
It's not-
applies
Yeah, it's just saying that type of
every
tree.
tree
It's
then,
just saying that type
for
of tree.
every lot.
It's not excluding a lot. It's saying that type of tree would be excluded.
in there, but what about the table? If it's listed in the table, that's what A, B, C, D require to be. It explains what's in the table. It doesn't talk about, in the table, it doesn't talk about trees on individual lots or individual trees on buildable lots.
What table are you referring to?
The only table that's there, XX.
Okay, I don't see, where do you see the,
Reading the next
It
page.
says, the appropriate areas on the property in accordance with the tree replacement requirements is listed in XX. It's not required here
What's
for
not
these
required?
replacement, well, you're telling me that mitigation and replacement apply to all mitigation and replacement as
Except
a
for,
small.
except for these, trees.
Wait a minute. No. XX. Only what's in XX.
Andy, I think what John was trying to say was, we're looking at section 8, and section 8 has A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Under A, the table is part of A.
Yeah.
But A is only one part of number 8. B and C and D and E are also part of number 8. So the table is not standalone, it's under A. And A has no greater or lesser influence than B, C, D, E, F, and G do. So you have to read the whole section 8 and apply the whole thing to the table, if you will.
Says the following, the tree mitigation shall adhere to the following standards, which the applicant shall mitigate loss or removal significant of specimen trees by planting replacement trees in the appropriate areas on the, in accordance with the tree replacement requirements listed in XX.
Right, and then there are sub-things below it that are all part of the.
All part of XX.
Okay, so Andy, if we said, listen.
Mitigation.
Andy, if we said, listen to table XX and and add the, and whatever, and the subsequent modifiers, whatever you want to call those. Your issue is that you're afraid people are going to read that and then stop. They're not going to go down there.
Well, I think what you got to do in C is say mitigation is not required for the removal of palm trees, palmetto, et cetera, on developed lots.
So, what I think to help, is that we potentially could move some of these into that note section of the table, and it reads as one, to maybe help there. I mean, but in my mind, it still fits all under section 8, but if it helps to clarify that, we can do that.
Can we leave with that, with you to?
Yeah, what I'll do is, just as we have under this here, I can move the notes that says what the preferred density is. We can put that as now B and
Put them all in there.
put them all in there.
We'll see what he comes up with.
Add a C.
Yeah, so all B through, it gets pretty long, that's why I don't want to add it all into the table.
That's okay.
But we'll do that.
Andy, he's going to take all of this and put it in this table.
Fine.
After our discussion yesterday, we had questions about what was more appropriate outside the buildable area or outside the footprint of the structure. And again, looking at the table, for row number 2, under individual tree, I guess I thought that should be more appropriately outside the footprint of the structure rather than outside the buildable area.
Which one?
Row 2.
Yeah.
The top half. So the second row, top half, we're talking about existing homes, have individual trees removed. These are, again, like we described, these are not deep disease damage or hazardous trees, these are healthy trees. So any tree outside the footprint of the structure, we're gonna include.
So for that one, we would change outside the buildable area to outside the footprint. Outside the footprint. And then, is there any changes to the 8 inches or greater consideration that was mentioned earlier?
You know, again, kind of going back and forth between 8 and 12,
Problem when you're trying to combine the two of them.
Have a standard there that you use?
are we consider protected trees? Yeah, so we're, that's right, that's where we want to be. That's exactly where we're positioned we want to be, yeah.
Would we, is there any reason we should move it to 6, so we're at the same as her, but not more restrictive? Or do you want to give,
I think theirs is obviously more detailed than ours.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think we probably picked this up, Luke, I think we probably picked this up from somebody else's, 8 inches, I know.
It's less restrictive, it's just a different standard, but if that's okay by me.
Similarly, down in the second half, tree removal for construction activities, site development. We get into this outside the buildable area and within the building footprint. Just a moment, if we could discuss that. So obviously, protected trees, so protected trees outside the buildable area means that's all setbacks or buffer areas, so we want all trees preserved. And then 12 inches or greater within the building footprint. I don't know, I'm a little confused by this section now, so.
I'll try to kind of detail it here. We began with the same specimen trees within the building footprint of a structure. Like you just stated, protected trees only focus on those areas outside the buildable area, buffer areas, the setbacks. Trees would be in full preservation in those zones. That's next to look at trees within the footprint of the buildable area that are not those large significant trees.
So I guess this is where I thought we were talking within the building, within the buildable area, but outside the footprint of the structure.
Yeah.
That's what I think that's supposed to mean. So the second to last row. So all trees 12 inches or greater. We want to talk about the trees that are inside the buildable area but outside the footprint of the structure. Those are the trees we want to talk about here.
Another way of, or maybe it's a clarification, do we differentiate trees that are in the setback area versus in somebody's yard?
Setback, anything outside the setback area is protected. They can't, we're talking about the area that is.
In their yard.
Yes, between what is technically the buildable footprint, which is everything inside the setback. So anything
So we're
inside the
protecting more
setback that is outside the footprint of the building.
Well, you're
that's what
protecting
we're-
whatever's in the setback.
Yeah, but what we're saying, we're protecting more trees because we're saying, you know, we're not allowing all the buildable area, we're just looking at where they're building.
Setback, they can't take trees down in any way.
I mean, that's the impact essentially. You know, whether-
So that, what I revised it to is within the buildable area, but outside of the building footprint.
Yes.
Okay.
So, sorry for being particular about this. But where does it say, there's so much in here, where does it say, no trees outside in the setback can be taken down?
I think that's a separate,
So when you look at the section,
Building.
tree removal for construction, activity site development, that second row, protected trees, anything 8 inches or greater that's outside the buildable area, those would be in full preservation outside of driveways and drainage requirements, those types of things. So that would be, to answer your question, that's that particular line.
Okay, then I'm back to the question.
yards.
What can we do in the yard?
Yards are still,
Outside the footprint, inside the buildable area? For tree removal for construction and site development?
Outside the footprint, inside the buildable area, that's what we just added. If you look up here, I'm tracking changes, so that would be this line here now.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, we're at the end of, are we at the, let me put this question. Are we at the end of commissioners' comments? Anybody else, any other commissioners want to make a comment? Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye.